Hi. Hello.
Oh, hi. Hello. Welcome to Lorebeards Roleplaying.
Welcome. Yes, I suppose we should introduce ourselves.
Be my guest.
Hi, I'm Vera. I work on tabletop games. You may know my work from Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer the Old World, Age of Sigmar Soulbound, etc. I write for games otherwise and do stuff. I make things.
That she does big things. My name is Ross Watson. I've been a game designer and author for a very long time, and a lot of my work is in role-playing games. Some of the high points, I have like over 100 published products, so I'll just hit the highlights. But Star Wars: Edge of the Empire, I worked on that. Torg Eternity, uh, Savage Worlds Rifts, and basically almost everything for Warhammer 40k roleplay except for Imperium Daledictum. So a whole bunch of stuff I've worked on.
Furthermore, you're a pretty darn good GM, huh?
I feel like I've done some good games. I have a pretty steady group, and they seem to like it.
That is a marker of success, I would say.
Okay, so this is going to sound awful, and I'm going to try. I didn't write this. A friend of mine did this for me, but he wrote an article called "The Best Game He'd Ever Played," and it was about our campaign. So,
Aww.
just saying, it has there is a little evidence to back up the fact that I'm a pretty good GM. So,
Wait, this is news. I'd like to read that.
okay, I'll have to send you the link later. Yeah, we're here on Lorebeards Roleplaying today. What's our topic, Vera?
Our topic is Mastering Dungeons 101. We are, in fact, going to talk about GMing today, about running the game, about being the master of the game, and having people write cool articles about how good you are at it.
I don't want to be that guy, but you brought it up, and I was like, fine. So yeah, game mastering. I've actually done a lot of seminars on this subject at different conventions and things over the years. And I always really enjoy talking to people that are passionate and excited about running a game, because that is a responsibility. It's a commitment. And it basically is the engine that drives role playing on the tabletop, is people who want to learn how to run a game.
Yeah, like everybody's there to have fun, everyone's friends, but the GM is who the whole thing revolves around. It is definitely the biggest responsibility at the table in multiple ways. It is a pretty important role, and it can be a lot of fun.
It can be. I have had a distinct amount of fun as a game master. I think one of the things I love the most is being able to be all the NPCs and make them as wild and crazy as I want.
Yeah, like the GM plays the most characters at the table. Most people there get to play their PC and perhaps some kind of companion. The GM is a whole cast that they determine the size and shape of, kind of at a whim.
It's true. Now Vera has a lot of thoughts on this subject for being a good GM, and I'm here for it. I want to see what she's got. So bring it, Vera. Let's hear it. What's your advice to someone who wants to be a good game master and just starting out?
Well, my first advice is to find why you want to be a GM, what you like about it. They're fun, sure, but you are going to be doing a lot for the table, and it's important to step into it with that kind of mindset, like that you're going to be the linchpin around which the game turns. It's a lot of preparation, it's a lot of consideration, and it's a lot of social responsibility at the table. But there's a lot of cool things that can come from it. It tends to forge strong bonds between friends who play together for a long time, in my experience, and it creates some amazing stories. I think that it can produce some amazing memories, and furthermore, it can make you better at a lot of creative tasks. It's an awesome hobby. It's a very cool time, but it is definitely a very important role at the table. With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, the old chestnut. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's said so often because it's true.
Yeah, the GM is the one who determines what the social contract at the table is. We talked a little about this during session 0, but as the GM, you're the one who determines what session 0 is going to be like, more or less, and also what the table is going to be like, or you should be, at least, ideally.
Yeah, I like to think of a game master a lot of ways as he's like the the chairman of the board. He's the one who says, okay, here's today's goal, here's today's agenda, and then he's going to call on you around the table to, explain your part in the overall scheme, right? I know that's kind of a weird comparison, but it's just the first one that occurred to me because it is a bunch of people sitting around a table.
No, it's very true because the role of the GM goes from like the first among equals, like the buddy who's like, all right, guys, today we're going to do this, all the way up to God, depending on what's happening. So it's a pretty important role. It requires you to think a lot about like what you want out of the game and what everyone else at the table wants out of the game, right?
Yeah, that's true. I always laugh when I think about one of my favorite comics about gaming is the Knights of the Dinner Table, which is just amazing. In case anybody's not familiar with it, it's just awesome. And in that comic, there's an early one where they are discussing the role of the game master, discussing what title he should have. And what they settle on is game trustee, because that denotes responsibility without authority. And I was just like, oh, you poor people.
Yeah, sometimes you need to have a little authority. We'll get into this later, but it's important once in a while to know how to say no to stuff. Like in an ideal world where everyone's on exactly the same page and there are never any issues, you don't need to have that authority, that gavel to bang. But in practice, it can be good to be comfortable with the position you do have at the table, which is, you make it go.
There's a comment I'd like to address, if I may.
Please, of course.
So we got a comment from Vault Boy 1300. By the way, big Fallout guy right here.
Nice,
so
nice.
Love the Vault Boy. Sometimes you should not trust the DM. Okay, so fun fact. I feel like the trust is like the most important thing about players and GMs. You have to trust them. But if you're saying that not everything the DM says in character can be trusted, that's different. Like, because some NPCs will lie, some NPCs will cheat. I think that may be what he's talking about. But like when you're talking to the players, just as the dungeon master to the players, no, they should be able to trust you. They should be able to trust everything you say.
Yeah, because ultimately they're kind of placing their fate in your hands, right? In a couple of ways. I feel like part of the social contract is that the GM's going to look out for everybody's fun, that everybody's trying to have a good time at the table, including their own. It's important to remember like your own position in the game as somebody who's trying to have a good time and enjoy themselves as the GM.
Oh, you just gave me a great opening.
Please.
Okay, so in my opinion, the number one thing a new GM needs to remember, the top of the list, is that the goal is fun. That's the only, if everybody walks away from the table and they're like, man, that was fun, literally everything else doesn't matter. that is the only result that you care about. And yeah, it's important, as Vera says, you as the game master are supposed to have fun. They as the players are supposed to have fun. You're not trying to perfectly simulate a world. You're not trying to perfectly adjudicate a rule system. It's just about the fun. Now, what fun means for your players and you might be different. That's a session 0 thing to talk about. But yeah, the goal, number one, is fun.
This is rule 0, I believe, that ultimately it comes down to having a good time, ideally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've definitely seen sessions get bogged down by super noodly pursuance of some esoteric rules thing for like literally 20 or 30 minutes for something that didn't matter at all, which is anti-fun for pretty much everyone there.
Are you actually handling rules questions and rules disputes is a good session 0 topic, but my default, and I think I would definitely recommend this for new GMs as well. My default is try to, if it's something that you can look up afterwards, look it up afterwards. If it's something you have to look up right then, okay, just tell everybody, hey, give me a second and look it up. There's a really good piece of advice here, which is it's okay to take a break. It's okay to say, hey guys, can I give me 5 minutes while I, figure this out or write up a quick NPC or whatever if there's some piece of the puzzle you need to have, just tell everybody to take 5 and it's fine.
Yeah, like the role is important, but it's not like high pressure, right? you should be able to take a few minutes to collect your thoughts on things, if things go in an unexpected direction. We'll talk about direction and structure a little bit later, but the important thing is that you feel comfortable making that decision. Like, okay, do we need to take a time for this to sort it out? Do we need to ignore this and come back to it? And the other important thing is that when you've decided it, the table's like, okay, we're going to come back to this later if I disagree still.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a second piece of advice that I could give if you'd like.
Please, of course.
So for new GMs, I think my best piece of advice is this: start small. Do a short adventure or a small region like a city or a town or a village. Have a manageable cast of NPCs, maybe 3 to 5, maybe 6 if you feel, like you can handle 6, no big deal. But don't try to sit down and create some sprawling epic novel or a 10 session campaign right from the beginning. If you're new, start small. I think you will really see what people latch onto in a much lower stakes environment, and it's a lot easier to handle.
Are you suggesting you don't need an entire universe full of statted out characters to begin playing a tabletop game?
No, God, no. You need like 5 or 6 characters. You need like a small town or a small village, and see what happens.
Yeah, like a lot of games naturally evolve well from this like fleshed out setting that lets people kind of make clear what their character's about, what they're interested in.
Oh, Valboy, you're killing me today. Valboy said, start with 50 NPCs that have intricate backgrounds. Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there are people who get that way. Like I feel like DMs do kind of attract a lot of folks who get obsessive about things, or detail oriented folks. So yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with over preparing, but be prepared to not use all of that. Know in your heart that it just might not come up because where the party goes, what they're interested in, etc.
Oh, that's huge, actually.
So let's start with we did session 0 last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the session like 0.5? What's that intermission like for the GM, do you think? What's the first thing you should do to set up the first session for a game?
Okay, so if you're prepping for your first adventure, well, if you're using a starter adventure, and there's plenty of good ones out there, you should definitely read it twice. I recommend reading it twice. Just identify like the key scenes, locations, anything special you want to hit. Okay, bullet points, and then you just you could make a flow chart. Some people do that. I don't, but some people can benefit from a flow chart. But the idea is you're not prepping a script. You're just preparing situations. You're not gonna have like a defined solution or anything like that. But you might have like, this guy wants this. This guy is in this particular location, and if no one interferes, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. Right? Like having that kind of idea is like the most. That's as deep as I'd want to go for a first adventure.
Yeah, like a lot of prep is just being in character, right? Like understanding the motive that these people have, the way they might sound or come off. Like if you're at a live table, the way they might hold themselves. Like I know a good few GMs who talk to themselves in character sometimes, that kind of thing, to flesh that out. But ideally, you should understand who's there, who's relevant, what they want.
So I want to highlight another comment. Zero Daimu says, depending on the system, do not start out random NPCs who are not going to end up in a fight or social situation where dice matter. Some people can just be names. He's right. 100%. You don't need to stat out everyone, just the people who are going to fight, basically.
Yep. This is a concern with adventure writing also, because you have word counts and so on, and you want to make sure that only what's really relevant gets statted. Anything that the players are likely to fight should probably have its own stat block if it's going to be interesting, especially like a unique ability or two. But for the most part, for like random people, if you really need to know what their stats are on the fly, you can take average characteristics and bump them based on what makes sense. It's not hard to fuss out. Just make sure you write it down if you do, so it's recorded.
Yeah, and this falls into another thing I think is really important for a new GM, is that you don't need to know all the rules. Those books can be big. I mean, Dark Heresy is 400 pages. Okay. You don't need to know all the rules. I would say learn the core mechanic, the basic tests, and combat. Those are the three things you're going to want to focus on, and then just accept that you're going to have to make rulings on the fly, and that you're going to learn and grow over time with this system. It's not something you can master in a day.
Haha. Hey.
Well, yeah. Dungeon masters are not like encyclopedias. They don't have to be. They shouldn't be. Instead, your goal is, again, fun as the facilitator of the story. That's all I want to say about that.
The best way to learn a game is by playing it. And like inevitably you'll discover like 20 sessions in you messed up flanking rules, or perhaps you were adding an extra bonus or something, and you can figure that out then. It turns out that didn't matter and it didn't get in the way of you having fun. So
yeah, I think another important thing for a new player to realize is you're on the player side. This is not antagonistic. It's not you versus them. It's you giving them opportunities to do really cool and awesome things. Sometimes really cool and awesome things happen after adversity or after even failure, right? Like, I mean, don't hesitate to be like, yeah, you did that wrong, and there's a consequence for that. But at the end of the day, you want them to do awesome and cool things. You want the game to be a lot of fun.
So when it comes to like what an individual player thinks is cool and awesome, that's sort of what starts to shape things outside of the adventure that's prepared. Just the characters that you have in mind, right? Is giving each character some opportunity to shine.
The spotlight rotation.
Yes. Which is a concept we talked about during session 0, which is like who's sort of in the driver's seat of the narrative, like which character you're discussing and following at a given time, because it turns out it's hard to describe the actions of each person in the party simultaneously. And also it's good narrative structure to focus on one cool move at a time, sometimes with a few people involved. But naturally, there's like one person kind of on camera, so to speak, in most individual moments, right?
So one of my skills that I feel like I've put a lot of time into developing is reading the other players at the table. And I don't, it's kind of like poker. Like you get that kind of general sense of where they're at just by looking around. And being aware of your players is really, really important, because the quiet guys are the ones you're going to want to call on a little more often for that spotlight. If someone hasn't said anything or done anything for a while, I'm talking like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it's a good time for a game master to be like, hey, what's your character up to? As a GM, part of your job is to make sure everyone gets some time to shine.
Yeah, and if you know what their character is about, or even what motivates their player, you can get a little more complicated with this and try and give them opportunities and like set them up to do things they'll think are cool. Like if you got a player who's really interested in political intrigue, you can give tidbits of the environment that might be of use to them later if they're investigating somewhere, perhaps evidence, stuff that they might be able to leverage. If you know that they're interested in combat and like big, cool, violent things, you can deploy the legendary "How do you want to do this?" that kind of thing. We'll get really stoked about this.
Yeah, which I mean, it's a thing Matt Mercer popularized. He wasn't the first one, but it's definitely like, yeah, how do you want to do this becomes a great moment at the table. And I think there's nothing wrong with stealing that. Absolutely steal that and use it. How do you want to do this? It makes everybody excited.
Listen, art is theft. Go for it.
Yeah. 100%. So we talked about our spotlight rotation. I would say the other thing that's important for a new game master is lead with the immersion, not the mechanics. If people are like, hey, what do I, what's in this room? Describe it using all the senses you can. Like, what does it sound like? What does it smell like? What do they see? What do they hear? Before you talk about mechanics, before you make dice rolls, is keep that immersion in front and center. The dice rolls and mechanics are important, and they are a big part of your job as a game master. And another little piece of advice here is that because of this specific thing, the most common roll called for at the table is a perception roll. It's like, regardless of game, that is always going to be the case.
Yep. That sounds right. I have never been at a table where that wasn't the case.
And then there's, I mean, the last part of this particular thing I'd want to discuss. I definitely want you to chime in, Vera, please.
Oh, please,
But
please.
is talking about keeping aware of people's state, being aware of the players. They call it player energy. And it's true for game masters. Game masters have energy too. They can either be up, they can be down, you can be standing, you can have your arms out when something big is happening. But just keep an eye on their energy levels, because there can be times where people can get bogged down, or get distracted, or just kind of lose focus. And it's a good time for you to say, okay, cool. You discover something, or an NPC shows up, or an encounter. There's a ways to break that logjam and keep things moving. But it's important that the time you'll know it's to step in is by kind of keeping an eye on everybody's energy level.
Yeah, like a session of a role-playing game can be long. And it's important to try and maintain a bit of a tempo through this. I can speak from experience when I say that like having an hour and a half of your session devoted to like pie in the sky city building or shopping or other things that are not really immediate and real can be like really, it can lose people who are there to feel a little more directly engaged. You get out of that sensory space, out of that descriptive space, and you're in this more abstract zone where you're planning and making things try and happen. And that can be fun for some players, but it's good to spice up in ways that can draw people back in.
There's another comment from Zero Daimyo I think is really good. Depending on the party, consider giving the player characters a buddy NPC you can use as a mouthpiece to nudge them a little, but make sure the NPC is never actually making any choices for them. Good advice. Go ahead.
This can be really useful. There are a handful of adventures that do this deliberately, like put someone in there with the party to guide them and like nudge them in the right direction. This can become sort of a GM PC, quote unquote, depending, but oftentimes a character like that at a new table can be like training wheels for the party. This happens structurally sometimes where they're there to like point them around and give them some advice. Good for new parties, especially to like help them orient themselves. But depending on the game, you might not need to keep them there the whole time. We talked a little bit about this during session 0 about like providing a character who can meet certain needs in certain games. Like if the party needs some kind of at camp healer, that could be an NPC who hangs out and is sort of in the back line. But you never want to overshadow the players.
True. I like to use what I like to call mascots for this purpose. And that could be anything from a talking familiar. I've had a talking gold coin as the group's mascot before. It can be like an old man, somebody who can't fight, but is being escorted by the group from one place to another. Just think of a character who's not going to be doing a lot, but could be really helpful. Even something like God, this is another old reference. Do you remember in Zelda, the little fairy that would fly? Hey, over here.
Yeah, Navi or Tattle, depending.
Navi or Tattle, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. You could have a fairy spirit or even a ghost. Obi-Wan Kenobi's Force Ghost can be a great mascot. Just saying.
Yeah, like you might be surprised what your party gets attached to. Also.
Oh God, yes.
I'm a player at a table where we have Wendy, the witch-sniffing pig, who in fact cannot sniff witches or really do anything at all other than be a pig, and we would follow her anywhere.
She must be protected at all costs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, another really great point of advice for new GMs: take notes on what the players are interested in. If everybody suddenly gets super interested in Wendy, the witch-sniffing pig. Just make sure you write that down. I need more pig. Just a line, in your notes.
No, this is like a cheat almost, because you could just like if you want to spice up the tempo of the game, you can like cut back to Wendy like flopping down, and the party will cheer like yeah.
Well, if they're attached, I mean, you don't force it. Let's be really clear. These kind of things have to be organic. Do not force them a mascot and be like, "This is your mascot." Offer a few choices, okay, and see which one they grab onto, because you can't. There are horror stories, I'm sure, about bad mascots.
Yeah, oftentimes the bad mascot is the dreaded GMPC who does overshadow the party and who occupies like way more spotlight than any NPC probably should, and they just can't be rid of. This is like one of these nightmare scenarios where someone is they have a stronger character than the party, like dragging them around, and people are not invested in that, right?
Can be. Um, so what are some other things you would tell to a new game master?
Well, all of this stuff related to sensitivity to what the players want, kind of is part of communicating well at the table. And you need to ideally in session 0 get a sense for what they want, but you can also feel out what they're trying to do in a lot of interactions and use that to build out like the kinds of things they're invested in, the kind of stuff they want to accomplish. And then you got to know when to give it to them and when to make them work for it. Like in improv, there's this principle called yes and.
Mm-hmm.
GMing is not all about yes and. Oftentimes, GMing is about yes but, or no but, or the dreaded no because. You have to be comfortable saying no, and you have to be comfortable knowing when to complicate things.
We could do a whole episode on when to say no, honestly.
Ooh.
Really.
Should we?
Really. I feel like it would be a lot of fun.
We would need to like prepare scenarios for that. I like that idea.
Well, sometimes no is character concepts. Sometimes no is dice rolls. Sometimes no is, there's a lot of reasons. We'll put it on the list and see if you guys want to talk about it in the future. Because yeah, Hawk says the power of no. Yes.
Yeah, it's an important thing though, and that might seem counterproductive because it's an improv exercise, right? And you want to make people happy, give them what they want. But believe it or not, it is among the most important basic skills, like knowing when to just prevent something, when to put the brakes on a little bit. And you want to be nice about this, keep the mood light ideally, but you got to know when.
Well, I love what you said about the improv rules because I don't know how familiar our listeners are with improv, but essentially in improv comedy, when somebody sets something up, they'll say, so I just bought this hot dog cart, right? And the rule in improv is you follow along. You're like, yes, and a hot dog cart. Well, that's really interesting. And then you explain why that's interesting to you. The what you don't want is somebody to say, well, I just bought this hot dog cart. And you say, no, you didn't. Because that just like kills all the energy and momentum of that scene. Okay. That's the basic idea why no is generally not the right answer, but sometimes it is. Knowing when, that's a skill issue, and it's something you'll learn the more you do it.
Yeah, and no but is the softer form of no, where you offer alternatives, you offer possibilities that do flow with what's trying to happen. And like, there's a lot of reasons this can come up, but it's nice to get in the practice of being comfortable, like saying no when it's important. Rush 21129 asked how worth it is to take improv acting class for being a GM and player. I think it's awesome. Just don't confuse your table for an improv session.
Yeah. Okay. Funny note. I've never taken an improv acting class, and I've GM'd a heck of a lot. But tabletop role playing is improv. It really is. So I don't know. I feel like I do pretty well if I actually took the course.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because like a lot of what you're doing as a GM or as a player is like improv with the direction determined by die rolls.
Oh, die rolls are okay. So yeah, there's a common thing too about die rolls with early GMs, and this is a question for you, Vera.
Yeah.
Would you recommend using a DM screen and rolling stuff out of sight for a new game master?
I would recommend rolling dice that don't mean anything behind your GM screen as a new game master, just to have access to that for later if you need. Keeping the party used to it can create some mystique, but I generally think that games flow better when things are rolled openly, and think that fudging should be like underused if possible, but there's nothing quite as so powerful as like a rolled die and then okay, in the middle of the party planning something.
Absolutely, it does get everybody going. Oh shit, something's happening. It's a good way to keep the tension going a little bit with that. But you nailed it for me, which is my general idea is that I like rolling dice in the open more than anything else. I wrote an article about this 20 years ago for Knights of the Dinner Table magazine, as a matter of fact. And
Oh.
the title of the article is "Screen Monkey No More." But that being said, this is a very minor note. It's a nitpick. If you're a new GM and you want to roll behind the screen, roll behind the screen. I don't care. I'm just saying in general, that's my preference is for open roll.
Yeah, and this kind of comes back to the idea of trust, right? People trust what they can see, and it can remove tension when the dice are hidden constantly and they're just told what happened. When people can see the die, they know the outcome intuitively, right? It's obvious to everyone when say D&D a natural 20 comes up, and like everyone knows what that means. It creates hype at the table.
Well, I mean, unless you have a brand new group of players, so
they'll learn very quickly.
True. I think, okay, so one way to build trust as a game master, like a lot of people ask me, like, how do I build trust? I like to say if you encourage feedback and you're open to change, those two things will start building bonds with your players. If you're like, hey, what did you think about this? And if they're like, hey, I would be happier if, we didn't have a mascot. I would prefer to not have a mascot. Right. And if you're the game master and you're like, okay, I'll think about that, or I'll consider it, that goes a long way. just allowing people to be heard and acknowledging that is a good step.
Yeah, like you don't have to do everything people request, but people like to feel understood. They like to feel known, and they like to feel like their voice matters, and really everyone should, because most tables shouldn't have so many people that it's impossible to meet the needs of everybody at least a little bit, right?
Oh, table size.
So that we can get into like structure in that way in a second, because that is a concern that plays into the spotlighting stuff we were talking about. But ideally, like talking to your players openly and candidly and honestly is a good way to find out what they want, like what kind of cool thing they want their character to be involved in, what they want the direction of the game to be, and so on and so forth. And like if you have a concern, if you're like, hey, I kind of have an adventure I want to go on, and you guys seem to be pushing back against like narrative hooks and drawing us in all sorts of weird directions, and I'm hoping to have a little more buy-in to like this journey. You can tell them that it's okay to tell your party stuff like that. Just do it nicely.
Yeah, and a fun fact about encouraging feedback is sometimes you'll get people to say, "Oh, I thought this was awesome," and you'll be like, "Oh, I don't even remember that." Like, you will start to learn that people are latching onto and picking up on things in ways that you probably didn't expect, and that's a very validating thing. It's good for you. It can even be good for the other players sometimes if they are latching on, if they're describing things other players are doing. But anyway, just encouraging feedback and being willing to listen to it is a really good first step towards building trust.
Affirmative. It's often nice to like talk post session and do like post mortem stuff, only if it's like the kind of vibe that's gonna happen positively usually. But it's nice to like talk through the aftermath and so on.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it on Discord. You can do it on whatever messaging service you like to. Can also, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be face to face, but if you'd like it to be, and this is what I do at my table is I spend the last 15 minutes just like, hey, what did you guys think? And then we kind of compliment each other. We talk about like the best thing that somebody did that wasn't yourself. And so everybody walks away from my table like, hey, I had a good time. Like these people noticed me do the thing.
Yeah, like this is a little thing for Aftermath, but thank your players. You're like, hey, thanks for coming out. Thanks for giving me a few hours of your time. They should probably be thanking you too. And oftentimes, if you extend gratitude to them, they will do the same because they should. As should you.
Ricky Chapman, 3377. He's one of our bigger supporters. I really appreciate you, Ricky Chapman. He's also a big gamer. Like whenever he turns in miniatures for us to look at, they're part of his gaming table. And he says, we open roll important things. Very cool. He also says, we recommend GM screens for notes and to screw with players by random rolling and going, interesting.
Yep.
Just to put some light pressure on. Yeah, you understand the assignment, Ricky Chapman, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's right on both counts. It is nice to have like a stand-up zone to organize things like common sheets. Like part of GM prep is having access to things you're going to need, which can include in a GM screen, things like In Warhammer, maybe your combat modifiers table, right? Things that are hard to memorize but important in play. But yeah, we roll important things openly.
Another big one for a new GM is the difference between a stone wall and consequences. Okay. And what I mean by this is you might have a locked door that the player characters to progress must get through this locked door. Okay. And they fail the roll. Well, one avenue is to say, okay, well, you're done. There's nothing you can do. You're going to have to go find some other way around, which is fine. I mean, as long as there is another way around. But an even more interesting idea can be consequences. Like, okay, you can't get through the locked door. So you take a long time and you do eventually get that lock open. And just as you open that lock, I mean, you're basically saying you succeeded even though you failed. And the consequence for this taking so long is that the guards notice you and they've been caught, but the door is open, right? See the difference between those two approaches. One is, well, what you tried just failed and you're going to have to do something else. And the other is, well, you succeeded, but it was bad.
The but can be important. And you can give options here. Like you can say, like, all right, you can't pick the lock. It's complicated. Something's stuck in there. You got two options. You can do it slowly and make your way through, or you can break the door down. One is slow, one is loud, right? Or you can find another way. There's like all sorts of ways to navigate this.
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, yes. Vera's very good at this stuff. I'm so glad she's here helping me out today.
Oh, shucks. I'm glad I'm a bona fide expert here. So we're leading seminars in GMing.
Hey, some conventions will put anybody on a seminar. I'm just saying.
The Lorebeards con appearance coming soon.
Hey, you know what? There's a lot of great local cons here in Denver if you ever want to come visit.
I make it out to Utah sometimes, possibly.
Oh, wow, Utah. Oh, interesting. I've never been to a convention in Utah.
I doubt there are any. There's probably a few.
All right, so what is the next thing we'd like to discuss?
I think that like structure could be good, just because we were talking about like number of players a minute ago. And I think that plays into the earlier discussion about like whether you want to use an adventure someone's pre-written, or you want to allow people to kind of explore in a sandbox, etc. Because I would say that like the looser the plan is for the game, the harder it is to have a lot of players.
Yeah, well, yeah, this kind of relates back to table size, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So, yeah, a common new GM mistake is to build an entire world, detail an entire city, do a lot of dense backstory stuff that players are never going to see or immediately ignore. This kind of wastes your time, and it makes it harder to pivot when the players do something unexpected. And I need to tell you this. The players are always going to do something you didn't expect. Always. No matter what, every session, there will be a moment you're going, huh, okay, weird.
Yeah, what's the saying? No plan survives contact with the enemy, except the enemy this time is your group of friends.
So focus your detail only on the things you know for a fact are going to be part of the play, like the town, the main villain, if there's a dungeon, that kind of thing. And the rest should just be bullet points or white space for you to improv. I learned a lot. You want to hear about how I learned my improv skills?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so I started gaming early. I was 8 years old in 1983 when I got my first red box set, and I started running D&D and playing D&D. And when I got into junior high school, I had a group of friends who wanted to play role-playing games, and we did it during our lunch break, which was like, we had like 30 minutes to get the food and eat it, and then 30 minutes to do whatever we wanted. So I had to come up with a plan and execute that plan in like half an hour every day at school. It was awesome in the fact that it was like a training course that I didn't even know existed. But by the time I graduated high school, I was like, oh yeah, no problem. Give me half an hour. I'll come up with what we need.
Yeah, I've got fond memories of a similar like middle school scenario. I was not directly involved, though. I was hovering over this totally ridiculous campaign happening during lunches. It was awesome. They amassed a lot of wealth. The players were getting what they wanted.
I'm always reminded of the classic film Mortal Kombat. I would like to get back to my amassing as soon as possible.
Yeah, though, some things you use and don't deploy can be used elsewhere as well. Like if you're making up stat blocks for like interesting creatures and whatnot, and the party somehow skips them, you can redeploy something similar later. Like you have a tool chest that you'll build out both of skills and like internal resources as time goes on. Like a year into a campaign, you might need an NPC block that you made for an entirely different thing 8 months ago. Stuff like that happens. So
that's right. Okay, another common mistake that a lot of early game masters tend to fall into, and this is one I fell into, to be clear. This is definitely one that I had to learn. Your game is not a novel. It is not a it's not a place for super long backstories and lore dumps. Okay, people came to play not to be lectured or talked to about your really cool like ideas for a novel. So make sure that the attention and the energy goes where it needs to go, which is into really interesting situations, really interesting NPCs, really interesting villains.
Yeah, this is a bit of a balancing act because exposition can be useful for making plans in some cases, for fleshing out the world, but there are wonderful skills that people can use if they want exposition. Like you can roll history to find out about someone's noble family, perhaps, if they're important to the plot. The amount of information you rattle off at the players for free and unprompted should be tailored to how important it is they know what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I say this a lot, and I probably will say this a lot on this particular show. There's no one true way to have fun. This is just my suggestions, my personal experience and anecdotes. So if you find something that works better for you, great, do it. So I'm going to say this, though, like in my experience, I think if you're talking for more than 2 minutes, stop and say, now what do you do? Try to time yourself to where you're not giving more than a 2-minute long spiel at any given point.
Yeah, like where you tailor this could well depend on your players and the vibe of the table, but I think that's often going to be pretty safe because spotlight and so on.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, if the players are really into it, it's possible to keep going and do more. It's whatever. But rule of thumb for me is like 2 minutes.
There's always like exceptions too. This is a little outside the purview of 101 perhaps, but you might get 1 or 2 good monologues in a campaign.
Okay. Yeah. So monologues brings up the idea of the NPCs and the NPCs being really cool. What you think is a really cool NPC is not always what the players think is a really cool NPC. So here's another really good piece of advice. It's okay if the players absolutely curb stomp your villain. It is okay. Don't feel like, oh, that was way too easy. Trust me, the player's going to be like, oh man, that was great. As long as they have fun, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it was a short fight. It doesn't matter if you had all these awesome moments for your villain to do cool stuff. You can take that and use it elsewhere later on. You can just move it around. That's the power of a game master. So if the players just absolutely destroy your cool villain, it's okay. Just be like, all right, man, cool. But he's got a big brother, and the big brother now wants to take you on. All right. Here now you've got like even more story to tell.
Yeah, there's like a rule from gun safety. Do not point the gun at anything you are not prepared to destroy. This applies also to an adventuring party. If you put a big scary bad guy in front of them, they might go for it.
I'm going to highlight a comment here. Micah says, yes, when you spend a month making a cool character and then a party member shoots them in the face, frame 1, a classic. Dude, all game masters have been there. I promise you. Vera's been there. I've been there. Every game master I've ever played with has been there when they're like, aha, now the Dark Lord emerges from his crypt and like round 1, critical hit, and he's done, you know?
Yeah, and this is like even crazier in games like D&D that can have like a lot of stacking systems where unexpected stuff happens. Maybe that magic item you gave them has a unintended consequence, and it can be nice to like let them get away with that stuff, right?
Rush 21129 points out there is always a bigger fish that needs a bigger boat. Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah, some of this stems from like who the party is interested in as well. Like if you know they're like stoked about a recurring villain, you could get away with like bringing them back in or something. There's mechanics in some systems to allow for this. So we have fate points and Warhammer. There's some mechanic in Fabula Ultima for like returning villains who get stronger and more dangerous over time. That's a tonal thing. It's a party enthusiasm thing. You never want people to feel cheated or like what they're doing didn't matter. So
Now,
allowing agency matters.
Oh yeah, big time. There is a follow-up I have to this, which is about encounter difficulty. I would like to tell a brief story.
Please, yes.
All right, back in the early days of D&D 3.0, there was this thing called challenge rating, and challenge rating was supposed to tell you how tough that what level the party needed to be in order to defeat the monster. Okay. Well, I had a 4th level party of players, and I had a monster with a challenge rating of 4. By the book, this should have been fine. Guess what happened? They got wiped the hell out. Just half dragon ogre, by the way, is challenge rating 4.
Yeah. Okay.
Under 3rd edition rules, and it just absolutely destroyed my party. TPK at the table. So yeah, that was me misjudging encounter difficulty, and that can happen. Just want to warn you. But there are also ways to deal with this. Like, you can use the encounter guideline or a calculator. Like D&D Beyond actually has a pretty good calculator for your challenge of the encounter you're about to use. Not every game will have this, but some do. But that is a starting point. Okay, that's not the don't do what I did and say, well, it must be fine, right? The designers put this in. I shouldn't have to do any additional work. No. That's a starting point. You should have an idea, just an idea in your head of what happens if this goes completely sideways. And the good answer, one of the best answers is, okay, yes, the party got wiped out, but they're not dead. They're just captured. And then you can do the Skyrim, you're a prisoner, you have to break out and, get back to the adventure thing. Another way to do it is to change tactics. Like all of a sudden the half dragon ogre like hears somebody in his treasure room and he's like, I'll be back for you. And he just runs off. That can also happen. If you just keep an eye on the players, if they look overwhelmed or if they look bored, like, maybe they steamrolled all of your encounters and maybe they're bored. Just don't be afraid to change the situation. Reinforcements show up or they retreat. Or the terrain changes. This is one of the things I love to do is do something with the terrain, like earthquakes or stuff falls from the ceiling or some kind of environmental hazard. But just have an idea. It doesn't have to be like, you could even write it down on an index card and have like a D6 roll if you really wanted to, of like random things to shake up a combat if it's too easy or way too hard.
Yeah, like this idea of the terrain shifting works super well, like a dramatic confrontation and so on. Like anytime that you have an opportunity to fall forward in a way that's interesting, that's probably a good route. Like, where do you stand on killing players, Ross? Because I think this can depend on the party, the tone of the table, and certain other things.
I'm sorry, did you say killing players?
Yeah, like reaching over the table when they misbehave and just throttling them. Yeah.
Okay, I have a no killing players policy. Killing player characters, though, that's different. Okay, so you're talking about player character death.
Yes, and like how you think that should be run. I think there's a couple of takes on this that are all valid, but I'm curious to your thoughts.
Okay, well, people who watch me over on Lorebeards 40K are going to know exactly what I'm about to say. It depends. It depends on the game that we're playing. For example, D&D, which is the game I have played and ran the most, has very specific mechanics for people coming back from the dead. There's a raise dead spell, there's a resurrection spell, there's even like some cantrips that can keep you from dying in the right circumstance. So it just depends. Like if you're doing D&D and your character dies, okay. If assuming that you've bought into the idea that Dungeons and Dragons has all these ways to come back from the dead, then the next step is the party coming up with the funds or going to an appropriate location where you can be raised from the dead. I played in a campaign where my character died twice, and I died the least number of times out of our entire group. So, that's fine. But if you're playing something more like a superhero game or a Star Wars game, player character death is a lot more impactful. And for a brand new DM, I would say, let it happen, I guess, because it's a very good tool it's a very good lesson to learn. Like what happens, how does that impact people? What do you think?
I think that the first time a character dies, it changes the vibe at the table permanently because it makes the consequences of what they're doing feel more immediate. And it can be really useful in some cases to let that happen. Definitely depends on setting and system. Like, again, it does depend. Like in a game like Pokeroll, the Pokemon tabletop game, you probably shouldn't be killing them off. These are your friends. In Warhammer, you should let mortal wounds happen. Fate's there for a reason. That tension is like key to the perilous feeling of the game. I think that letting people make mistakes is important also for their growth as players. If somebody like really steps in it, they should know. But it's important to not go overboard. You shouldn't be playing to kill your PCs in most cases, but
be willing to do it. That's, I guess, the important thing here. But again, like I said, it depends. If I'm running a game at a middle school with a bunch of 12-year-olds, I'm going to be a lot more forgiving than if I'm playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay with my 40-year-old friends, where I'll be like, yeah, your character's just dead. You did the thing and now you're dead. I like what you say, that it's a good way to set stakes and make things feel a lot more real. But that, again, I wouldn't say you need to intentionally do it. Just if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't go looking for it, but like the first time the party blunders into something like lackadaisically and they get overwhelmed, like they'll remember that, right?
Yeah, different games have different feels, different vibes. If we're playing Morkborg, that's a very different thing than if we're playing Maid.
The first time one of the maids dies in combat.
Oh my god. I can't wait till we talk about Maid, by the way. I'm so excited to talk about Maid.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun.
And just wait till I get to break out my copy of Super Babes to talk about, because that's going to be wild. So for anybody who doesn't know, Super Babes was one of the very first role-playing games to have a resource that you could spend to alter the outcome of your rolls.
Meta.
Yeah, we will have to wait until we talk about that to get deeper into it, but it is a very interesting piece of role-playing game history. Anyway, that's part of the reason why I have it on my shelves, because it's historic. Oh my god, we could talk. Oh, I can't wait. We have so many cool things coming up to talk about. We're gonna have the worst role-playing games, which
oh boy,
super fun. We're gonna have the Holy Grails.
In trouble.
Oh god, yeah. Well, I mean, I just now thought of another thing we need to put on the worst games list. For no other reason than its creator. But yeah, anyway.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we will get there. There's role-playing is just such a wide spectrum these days. And it's so great that it is, because when I was a kid, growing up, I didn't understand the difference between a dungeon crawl and non-dungeon crawl, because that was what we had. We had dungeon crawls. That's what we did. And now it's like, okay, well, this game is kind of like an old school dungeon crawl. And I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is. And then somebody else says, well, actually, I'm doing like a sci-fi sandbox game where you can go anywhere and do anything. And I'm like, ooh, that also sounds cool. I know what that is. Anyway, sorry.
No, because that brings up an interesting point. Related to combat difficulty in some ways. Which of those would you say is more suited to a new GM?
I'm sorry.
between a sandbox style game and a dungeon crawl, a more linear adventure?
Oh, linear. By linear is so much easier for a new game master. Yeah. If you are a new game master, I would definitely say maybe don't do a full sandbox, or if you are, do a tiny, like it's a town sandbox, right? Or a single ship in space, and that's all you have to worry about.
That's a good structure.
Well, sandboxing. Why don't you define sandboxing so people know what the hell we're talking about?
So, a sandbox, as you may know, is a children's play zone where you have lots of sand and you can make structures and dig tunnels and put action figures down and do all sorts of stuff and sort of whatever you want. It's very flexible, and if you use your imagination, it can turn from a like boring set of grains into a amazing realm with borders and delineations and so on. And in tabletop gaming, a sandbox is just that. It is a empty space that is populated kind of as you go. It is developed for the players to give them things to sink their teeth into as they explore. You flesh out more of it, and it is sort of a game style where they can go anywhere and do whatever interests them based on a couple of key hooks that are more freeform.
I would like to address one comment, and then we have a super chat I'd like to read.
Yes.
So first of all, Wes Loose, love that name. He says, I don't agree. First of all, it's okay. I don't mind that you disagree, because this hobby is big and there's a lot of room for different interpretations. And Wes Loose says, linear games can confuse DMs because they feel like they have to follow the module or the story. I think it depends on the DM, he says. You're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong. And if you prefer non-linear for your for an early game master approach, go for it. That's not my advice, but I get it, and it's totally fair. This is why I wanted to bring this up, is because it's okay to be different than what we're saying. We are not. We're very experienced, but we are not the end all be all experts.
Yeah, like I would say the pitfalls you face are different running a sandbox as a new GM versus trying to run a more linear adventure as a new GM, because you run the risk of overcorrecting in a linear space and undercorrecting in a sandbox. You run the risk of your party being dragged along as opposed to lost and without a real clue as to what they're going to do. Directionless or too much direction. They're different challenges.
Hawk has a great comment here. He says, I hate sandboxes. They're coarse, rough, and could go anywhere. All right, now we've got the super chat. Ricky Chapman coming in with a steel chair. Thank you, sir, for your support.
Thank you.
The big bad of a Star Wars campaign, he says, was killed midway through the campaign. We solved this by slowly leaving hints of something happening. They figured out that the big bad evil guy had cloned himself and had digital copies of his brain. That's really cool.
That's fantastic.
I dig that. I was actually thinking, I think I might do something like this in my current Star Wars campaign. So yeah, that's awesome.
Like, that's a great example of falling forward, because the party is not cheated of their victory. They sure beat the guy who now wants revenge, or possibly wants revenge for his cloned selves, etc. Like, there are so many ways to fall forward like that and build off of things you were planning while acknowledging the party's successes. And I think part of being a good GM is giving that space, like letting the party take their win and like still building off that into a narrative that incorporates things you have planned, that gives them opportunities to do more things they care about, and so on.
Yep. Would you be upset if I wanted to talk about pacing?
I would love to talk about pacing. I think it's quite relevant to this idea of linearity versus sandbox things, and it is a core skill.
Pacing is... I feel like I've put more time into learning pacing than anything else in my repertoire of a game master. Pacing is really important, at least for me, basically, this is a question of, and you see this in Critical Role even, especially in the early campaign, about shopping, right? We want to go shopping. Do you make shopping into an actually... you're the game master saying, okay, you go to this stall and this particular proprietor has these goods and he has a wacky voice? Or do you just say, okay, cool, you go shopping. Here's the player's handbook. Let me know when you guys are finished buying your stuff. Those are two extreme ends of the same general idea. And what it boils down to is just, can you keep an eye on that player energy? Because you don't want to have a lot of dead air. You don't want to have people going in circles. What can seem obvious to you as the game master might be very obscure to the player characters. And don't hesitate to remind them, because their characters will know things that the players don't. Sometimes you'll be like, hey, you're a very skilled warrior. Your character's a second level fighter. You've been around. That there's plenty of shops in the city where you can buy a sword, no questions asked. Do you want to just go do that? Or, you can say, you can restate known facts. You can be like, just remember, while you guys are out shopping, that at moonrise the sacrifice begins, so you only have a little bit of time. Right? It's okay to remind people. You can recap clues, like, here's what you learned so far. Like, okay, great time for this. If you have a break scheduled for your game, like I like to use a meal break. Like, we have a lunch that we'll do after we get started. We'll do a lunch, and then we'll come back after the lunch. And so this is a good time. Or if you call for a break, hey, 5-minute bio break, everybody. And when they come back, say, okay, so here's where you're at. Just do a quick recap. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the thing about shopping, right? Like, it doesn't really matter if you detail it all out, or if they just buy it out of the book. It's whatever works best for you and your group. And if there's some people that are like, oh, I can't wait to go back and see my favorite, sword seller, because sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll have they'll latch on. I had an innkeeper, was this old grandma who sewed quilts for everybody who stayed with her. Just like the pig, she must be protected at all costs. So whenever they went back to town, they're like, oh, I can't wait to see, I can't remember her name, but yeah, they'd say they'd want to see her and get a quilt. Anyway, so yeah, it just depends. But slow down for key moments. If it's a key thing, if the players are really into it, that's when you want to slow the pace down. If people don't really care, if they're just like, okay, I can't wait till we get to the next thing, then just get to the next thing.
Yeah, one of the challenges that you face with something like a shopping trip at a larger table is that, by the nature of what it is, it kind of makes sense narratively for the party to like go off and split up, because they have very low stakes in what they're doing, which is another good time to kind of elide things when there's no stakes. But it is easier to give shopping and things like that, I think, more role-play interactions, more spotlight time in a smaller party, where even though they're split up, it's okay to like focus in. The balance for this can differ, but it can be a challenging session if you have like 6 people who are all having their own role-played interactions with a shopkeeper. Like, that's where the pacing comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And the old Raymond Chandler trick is a great way. If you don't know how to move on, the Raymond Chandler trick comes into play. So what's the Raymond Chandler trick, Vera? Do you know it?
I do not. What is the Raymond Chandler trick?
Okay, so Raymond Chandler, when he was being asked about how he writes, his books, is he was saying, whenever I felt things were slowing down, I would have men with guns burst into the room. And it's a great piece of advice. If you're like, man, this scene is just really slow and I'm not sure what to do, bad guys burst into the room. That's the answer. I mean, it just boom. Oh, have you heard about the trick for player engagement?
Is it men with guns bursting into the room?
No. It's actually different. If you need the players, if you absolutely need the players to go from point A to point B, there's one trick that always works. Have you ever heard of this?
What is this?
Steal something from them. It can be as minor as a fucking sock. And I promise you, players will go to the end of the earth to find out who stole their damn socks. And if you're like, okay, they're camped somewhere in the wilderness and they're debating endlessly about what they're going to do next, you just point at somebody. You notice that one of your socks is missing, and then make a roll. Oh, and there's some tracks leading off to the northwest. You will be shocked how quickly they break camp and move in that direction.
Yep.
You will be absolutely shocked. Stealing something from the party, that is a you will not pass moment. They will get fired up.
They're going to want answers, right?
To me, it's one of the great secrets of game mastering.
You heard it here. Yeah, I've heard writing advice to drive a truck through the scene, which is similar in nature to Men with Guns Appear. I think it's like literally crashing through the wall, some kind of dramatic moment. And stealing is similar to this structurally, just a little less violent.
Matthew Adams Style says Matt Colville has the same advice. He calls it Orcs Attack. Yeah, that tracks. Colville is a very good. He has a lot of really good tips and tricks. So recommend that.
Excellent channel, good game too. I really like. I really like his recent product. It's nice.
Oh yeah. So here's the thing to avoid as a game master. Vera,
Sure.
have you ever taken things personally as a game master?
Oh, constantly. I'm always glaring at people like, how dare you?
It's not personal. It's never personal if it's in game. If it's in game, like if the player character is doing something, do not take it personally. It's not an attack against you. It's not a criticism, and especially like this can relate back to the really, really cool villain again. You're like, how dare you? You're making fun of my super cool villain. It's not personal. It never is. Sometimes players just want to be a smartass. Sometimes players just want to be a anti-authoritarian figure. You can actually learn a lot about people from what kind of characters they play, but this is not that episode.
That's true though. That's very true. You'll notice patterns in a long-running group, but
Yeah.
this is very true. Like and it can come in various forms, right? One part of the social contract at the table in a lot of cases is that the player characters should be kind of not terrible to each other because they're very invested in those. As a player at a table, you get connected to the character you're playing pretty inevitably in most cases. And even people who have a little more separation, it can be aggravating if someone in character is being quite nasty to them. On the other hand, you as the GM are playing pretty much every other character in the world, and people will have all sorts of negative and hostile interactions both with your characters and out of character, describing the bad things they want to happen to a certain creature. You got to like wash that off, not let it like weigh on you too heavily, especially meta concerns. Don't take it personally when they don't care about a plot point, right? More so than just like what they're saying to you.
Yeah, good point. If they don't engage with something that you put a lot of time and effort into, it's not personal. And you can always repurpose it later. So here's another good question for you. When you are making a change because someone gives you feedback and you're like, okay, would you make a small change or a big change?
It depends on how needed the change is, and sometimes how the party feels about it. I would say that like for anything that's going to be a big change, it's important to kind of call people together and discuss it prior to like pulling the trigger, because something that dramatically shifts how the campaign is going to work, you kind of want buy-in from everybody. Player agency is a thing that can be felt outside of just like the immediacy of rolling die. Player agency is partly the feeling that people are shaping the kind of experience they're having. And you might want to deal people in if you're going to be changing the campaign from a more sandbox style game to something that is a linear investigation focus for the next 20 sessions, right?
Absolutely. I would like to share another quick GM secret.
Please.
So I'll frame the situation and then we'll get your answer and then I'll talk about the secret. So you're a brand new GM, you're sitting around the table, your players are interested and they're engaging in their story and everything. And now you want to bring in something important to one of their characters. How do you as a DM decide, how do you as a DM best incorporate something that their character is interested in into the game?
Ooh. So this is something I was thinking about earlier as well. This is an important question because the thing you want to avoid is having things that like drive character motivations feel cheap or light. You want to have it feel earned and you want to have it feel natural. And the way that threads in should ideally evolve. You don't want to like present someone with the long lost locket of their house out of nowhere because it's sitting on a rock somewhere. You want to allow that relevance to build. And I would say a good way to thread it in is to introduce elements related to that key conflict, that key idea, in a way that is not immediately apparently obvious, that evolves over time and that gives them broader context so they can discover the connected nature of what's happening to something they care about. It should stand on its own and then become apparent that it's connected to this driving motivation they have, ideally, I think.
So my little GM secret for this is the character sheet is a window into what the player wants. This is actually something Aaron Alston did in his book Strike Force. By the way, Strike Force is awesome, and I was in charge of the revision of it that happened about 10 years ago. But it is basically a how-to book about running long-term campaigns. And one of the pieces of advice I found fascinating was that if ever he didn't know how to bring a character's attention back to the table or engage with that character, he would say, "Hey, let me see your character sheet for a second." And he would look at like, what have they invested points into? You know, are they proficient in skills that they want to use? Dungeons and Dragons has, of course, the bonds, flaws, and ideals, which are also really great. But yeah, look at the decisions they made. Do they have a high strength score? Oh, I should give them something where a strong guy could be handy. Do they have a fear or a phobia as one of their flaws? Oh, maybe that should be the thing, the way I can draw them in. It can even be something as simple as a piece of equipment. One of the best things about D&D, by the way, is it has that whole trinkets table. You remember that when you play,
yes.
You get a trinket. Those trinkets are all adventure hooks. Like every single one of them is a cool adventure hook. And if they have written down that trinket, and by the way, you should totally have your players have trinkets. That is another great way to be like, hey, that dead fairy you've been carrying around, it looks like it's, a skeleton now, and it's banging on the inside of the jar. Oh, that's weird. How did that happen? Oh, God, this links into another thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle it when people point out plot holes or point out something that doesn't make sense?
Oh man. So a real plot hole. There's a few ways to address this, right? You can acknowledge that it doesn't make sense and then come up with a reason why, which is sometimes the most elegant. Like, they've uncovered a conspiracy. That can work. You can retcon things, which is often like less satisfying. Or you can like provide some contextualizing information. There's a few approaches. It depends on how severe the plot hole is, right?
My personal advice is to say, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Wonder why that happened. And you throw it back to the player characters. You're like, you basically kind of pretend like you had it planned. You don't go say, oops. You're like, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And sometimes I'll even lampshade it. I'll say, you personally know that is not how that should be. Like your character understands implicitly something is very different here. And then let them, and then like ask them what they think. Even have your mascot be like, wow, what do you think about that? And just listen to them. Like sometimes they'll come up with way more interesting plots than you ever will.
The conspiracy angle is probably the most satisfying in a lot of cases. Like it can add a layer of depth where there wasn't one before, etc. And it does fall into that amazing advice you were given on during session 0, which is letting the players fill in things, like letting them their imagination determine possible answers to questions.
9 times out of 10, it's way cooler than anything that I had planned.
That brings. Here's a question: where do you think retcon should happen at the table, if ever?
So, this can usually be a factor of. It's usually a case of like a player just not being satisfied with what they have. For me, at least, the examples I can think of are choosing the wrong class, and they're like, I don't really like this class. I don't want to be a ranger. And you just like, you know what? You've actually been a sorcerer the whole time. There you go. Allow them to rebuild their character. some stuff like that. Those are the ways I use retcons, is to make sure that players are more satisfied with their character. But rarely you can be like, okay, guys, I totally screwed up. The name of the dragon is actually this other name, and I apologize. Could you please update your notes because we're using that name from now on? Stuff like that.
Yeah, let's define retcon. So a retcon is a portmanteau, a shortening of the phrase retroactive continuity. It means that going back into the continuity, you retroactively change the thread of what's happening in the narrative. So you determine something actually was this way the whole time, whatever that is. Maybe the town was a different place, a different name. Maybe someone was a mage instead of a sorcerer, or the fighter instead of a rogue. Maybe an event never happened. And you just try and thread that through everything else and just say retroactively, that's true.
So speaking about continuity, do you want to talk about being consistent as a game master?
Yes, in fact, this is a great reason why retcons are not great usually. It should mostly be used for like player decisions and things. Like if someone's like in character new and they like do something like totally foot and mouth, and it's like maybe you don't want to have done that. Like that's something you can do. Consistency is part of trust. Consistency is part of having an established setting. Consistency means having the game feel kind of the same way every time in a narrative sense. It shouldn't be like Candyland one session in Barovia and then like Gothic Horror the next and then back to wacky hijinks. Ideally, you want the tone to be consistent, the feel of like how fair things are to be consistent. You don't want like wild swings in how difficult things are. For example, if you teach a party to fight characters in combat against like little level 1 goblins who are very sad, and then you sick the half dragon ogre on them immediately afterward, they can be overwhelmed and frustrated by this because suddenly the vibe has changed. The thing they got confident with is no longer applicable.
Yeah, consistent tone is a big deal. I do agree with that. I would say though that consistency is the ideal. It is not necessarily written in stone. Like, it's fine to have a game that has a heroic fantasy feel and then do a session on Halloween that is a lot more horror, right?
Yes.
That's fine. It's fine. Nobody cares, right? Or if you dip into the Feywild, which I did on my campaign, and then the character that we dipped into the Feywild for, like that person couldn't be at the table for like 3 sessions, and we had to stretch out this journey into the Feywild. Oh my God, so many headaches. But yeah, that was a tonal shift because it was, fairyland. It was kind of, both lighter-hearted and darker than my typical game sessions were. Anyway, it's fine as long as the ideal remains. Like, that's the goal.
I think what you've lighted on here is really important, which is that tonal shifts are best when they are deliberate, when they serve some specific purpose. Like maybe there's a scenario where you do want your party to unexpectedly face a really difficult foe, where you do want things to be a little sillier for a session to add levity, to add contrast. Like there's a lot of room for this, but you should think about like why you're doing things ideally and still have that ideal, that home point that ideally, because it's the ideal, everybody kind of agreed on. Everybody kind of knows.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of what we're saying here is cool and all that, but I would remind you, you don't have to take yourself too seriously. This is a game. The goal is to have fun, and as long as you do that, everything else doesn't matter. Don't stress yourself out too much with the things we're saying here. These are guidelines. These are ideas.
Yeah, and like frankly, you can have fun in a lot of ways at the table. You're gonna have a good time just getting together to do it, but
nobody should be anxious. Nobody should be legitimately feel anxiety being a day master. Being a little nervous is fine. Being like a little more excited is fine. But you shouldn't be like, oh no, oh God, like don't take it that seriously, please.
How do you feel about joking around at the table? Because this is sort of a social contract communication type question, but
so this goes to what I think, again, one of the most important things I learned as a game master. It's called table control, is the overall idea. so humor has its place, right? Like being funny is part of having a good time, and as long as everybody's having a good time, that's all that matters. But I would say if it's disruptive, there are times where jokes can be disruptive. Okay. And this is going to be unfortunately one of those situations where I'm going to say you'll know it when you see it. I don't feel like I can give you a specific example, but you'll know it when you see it, when there's a disruptive joke. And if it's a disruptive joke, my advice is to just acknowledge and go, hey, okay, and then move on, because table control is all about getting their attention back onto the game. Okay. And this can happen when you take a bio break and everybody goes up, gets a drink or whatever, and they come back and they start talking about, what they're going to do next weekend. And that's fine. And I do recommend you allow a little bit of that, but then it's your job as the game master to say, okay, guys, and now we're back at the game and we're starting with, what are you going to do? So table control is refocusing the group when things get disrupted. Right?
Absolutely. And that can come into play in a lot of positions, like whether people are joking around about a character, whether they're getting way off tangent, planning things out, whatever's happening, because you only have so much time to play. And in the amazing modern world we live in, people can hash out all sorts of things in between sessions. So if they're really excited to do city building, perhaps you could have make a plan for that in the rough between sessions, as opposed to for an hour of time that you're meant to be adventuring forward, and so on.
I will say that I think this kind of goes back to the idea of curb stomping your cool NPC is fine. If there's a joke that everybody breaks up laughing at, and especially if it's directed at something you're doing, just own it. Just be like, yeah, you got me, guys. This is I'm just glad to be a part of it. That's something I have. I'm just glad to be a part of it. Even if it's something like I had a game master once who he would love to celebrate the utter destruction of his NPCs by acting like it was his own child. He would take off his hat, he would take off his glasses, he'd rub his face, he'd go, "Oh my God, I spent so much time designing that guy." But he would just really go into it. He would overly emotional about the death of his cool NPC, and it was funny. It's a lot of the stuff we're saying is you kind of had to be there moments, right? This is one of those. The group just really got into that kind of thing. We thought it was funny. So yeah, humor is fine. It's great if it's organic. It's great if everyone's enjoying themselves. But if it's disruptive, just try to acknowledge it and move on.
This is a good point too. Zoom in there. There's a question about whether the tone of the campaign can be humorous, and how that plays in. I would say that if you're trying to run a funny game and you've got joke characters, hear me out, joke characters. If you've got silly stuff happening in the narrative, that is a different concern, because it sort of lends itself to more levity around the table. It becomes an issue, though, in a game that is a little darker and more serious, and people kind of refuse to engage with anything that's happening. They're making light of everything they encounter, because it can sort of take the wind out of some people's sails if there's one person who's really not engaged with the thing and they're just messing around, and everyone else is there to be a little more zoned in on a darker tone. So you got to know your players, you got to feel it out, but.
Okay, well, let me explore that a little bit. Vera, let's say you're the DM and you're running the game, and I, for whatever reason, I'm just being an asshole that day, and I'm not, you're trying to present something that's really majestic or really scary, and my character's not having it. He's like, yeah, whatever. What do you do about that? How do you handle someone who's just they're not there to play? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. So it depends on your relationship with the person in a few ways, if they've been problematic in the past. The no-sell is a classic wrestling tool for this. So I think of a lot of things in terms of professional wrestling. And the no-sell is you just straight up ignore it.
Can you explain why it's called a no-sell?
Yeah. So selling in wrestling is when the guy comes in with the clothesline, and the other wrestler is blown away. Oh, he's selling. He's selling right now. He's launched by this incredible power of the dude who's hitting him. The no-sell, on the other hand, is when you jump up and double kick the Undertaker in the chest and he doesn't move because he is invincible. He is unmoved. He has no soul, that making his opponent appear weak and foolish. They have no agency here. Straight up ignoring something somebody says is impolite. But as the GM, sometimes you have to treat things like a side comment and like let it slide and not engage with it, because there is nothing that can undermine the majesty of your cool NPC faster than having going like, no, he is cool, I swear, when somebody's like just in character talking shit.
Well, this is a topic that is a big one, but it's basically, you know, difficult players. And I have had a difficult player at my table, running Dark Heresy, actually. A guy who was a tech priest, and he'd taken the one feat that replaces half your brain with mechanics, and he doesn't feel fear anymore. Remember that guy? But he had interpreted that to where he didn't really feel anything anymore. And it was really difficult because I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to immerse people in the setting. And I'm talking about, like, you know, hey, you're looking at this vast expanse of space and you see this dark thing flying towards you. And, you know, it should cause some sort of reaction because this is something your characters are not used to. And he would just be like, whatever, my half my brain is metal. Specifically for that, although there's a lot of different types of difficult players. But if you have a no-sell in your group, my advice would be to take them aside privately and say, hey, I feel like I'm trying to, you know, present things that will make you feel something, and it feels like you're choosing not to feel things for your character, and I'd like to find a way to fix that. You know, communication.
Yeah, because that's true. Like, they're no-selling you, so you have to no-sell back. You kind of get in this standoffish position where you're not really, like, meeting. Your visions aren't aligned, and that is a good chance to take things aside and talk it out. Because ideally, everyone should be on the same page of what's going on. This is sort of the same approach as somebody who's just not engaged at all. This is another problem variety, but what do you do if somebody doesn't notice things that are there just for them, and things that should be relevant to their character, that should matter? They don't perk up when called on in combat. Like, they're disengaged. What's the approach?
Utterly disengaged?
Yeah, getting there.
Okay, well, all right, so this is general advice for difficult players, but the very first thing I would counsel is to separate the behavior from the person. Okay. Mm-hmm. You have a problem with the behavior. You don't necessarily have a problem with the person. And then the second thing I would say is you always want to try to address this one-on-one rather than at the table in front of everybody. Those are my typical things. Yeah. And the third thing is one, you know, you mentioned a lot, and I 100% on board with: communication is your biggest and best tool.
Yeah, oftentimes there could be like something outside of the game weighing in on that, but it's something you could best investigate, like one-on-one, like Ross is saying. You never want to interrogate somebody in front of all your friends. That creates a bad vibe. Like I was saying earlier, people will never forget the first time a character dies during a game. They will never forget that either, the first like argument. That's not good to do during game.
All right, I'm going to say something's a little controversial because it is technically manipulation. All right.
Ooh.
It is technically manipulative, but I have found it is the best way to get the behavior addressed. And that is to talk about how the behavior impacts the table, like the other players, rather than how it affects you. Like if someone is, as you say, disengaged, the way I might frame that conversation, and again, this is intentionally a little manipulative, so I want to be clear that this is what that is. But you could say, okay, listen, you know, Randy is really, he's here to play. And if he drives 2.5 hours to this game and he feels like you're not paying any attention to what he's doing, that kind of ruins the fun for him. Right? People tend to respond a lot better to that rather than saying, hey, I worked really hard on this. Why aren't you working with me? I'm not saying to be dishonest. This is not about dishonesty. This is just about framing it in such a way to get a better response, which again is manipulation, and I'm being very clear about that.
But it is a respect thing. Like, it's not wrong, because you as one of the players also want people to be invested, and oftentimes people will kind of all feel the same way if somebody is actually being disruptive in some way, whether it's because they're not engaged or because they're talking about irrelevant stuff, etc. Because you get like such a window to do this. So just don't embarrass people. Show them respect, request respect, talk things out.
Agreed. And be open. Don't necessarily go in saying it's my way or the highway, but that may be a factor. Although I would like to read a super chat right now.
Yes. I as well.
Before we forget, Ice Veins 88, welcome, sir. It's always glad to see you. Side thought: have either of you played Drinking Quest? I have not.
I have not. I have just looked it up, and it seems amazing. The main mechanic is if your character dies in this board game, you finish your drink immediately. And I think that sounds like a fantastic quest. This is one of those pub games they talk about.
Well, more and more places are doing Dungeons and Drafts where you can go to a local brewery or something like that and play D&D for 4 hours, which is pretty fun. So Ice Vein says, I suggest you do for a fun, laid-back experience. I will check it out.
I do like fun, laid-back experiences. And beer.
Good beer. I like good beer.
Mm-hmm.
I have pretty high standards for beer.
Good.
So what are some other ways to handle... okay, maybe let me back up a step. Would you agree that difficult players are probably the nightmare scenario for a new DM?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different flavors of these. I think that it is the hardest thing to manage for a new DM. It's like a really problematic guy because you aren't comfortable with your own authority. You don't have perhaps mastery of the system, and they can exploit that in some ways, depending on the kind of problem they are. You don't have oftentimes an established bond at the table that you can lean on to feel confident in your decision making. It is a barrier to forming the kind of like trusting environment that you want to create as a DM, like sort of the vibe that you want.
Yeah, and granted, this is more of a long-term thing than for a brand new DM, but trust is key. The game is so much better if the players trust you as a DM master. It's so much better, I promise you. Because what you don't want is people sitting around the table wondering if you're fudging the dice against them or grudge monstering or all the other different ways that game masters can screw with players. What you want is for them to go, oh, I hope he throws that cool monster at us, or I hope we get to meet that cool NPC, or, oh, I can't wait for that holy sword I know is just around the corner. That's what you want. You don't want the other way.
Yeah, like ideally everyone should be excited to show up and do the thing, and affirmatively, like one deliberately problematic player can ruin the experience for everybody. So
do you want to give some examples of bad players?
Oh boy. Should we like run through different flavors and then
Yeah, I've got 4 examples. Go ahead. I'll chime in whenever you're ready.
All right. Number 1, someone who's like rude. Someone who refuses to share the spotlight. They are confrontational. They bulldoze other players. They occupy space that should not be theirs. They are unpleasant. They don't care about anyone else's fun except their own. And they are not nice. And this is not great. Another kind, the power gamer. This is someone whose character is designed to break the game. And this can be really tough to deal with for a very new GM because they have beaten you. They have made a character that is so strong, that is so good at the game, that they outpace the capabilities of the rest of the party by a mile, and any character that is appropriate to fight them cannot possibly engage with the rest of the party. And this can be okay depending on how you run combats and so on. It's good to let someone shine if they have a combat focused character, but like a real like power gamer can break out of combat scenarios also and just force stuff to happen. And what else? Someone who just doesn't care can be tough. They just like really are disengaged fully. That's also its own kind of issue because it sucks energy out. They're showing up, but they're like totally not paying attention. They're on their phone the whole time. They're incorrigible. That can be an issue. There's a few different varieties.
The 4 types that are most common for me, in my experience, I think you actually described this guy as the loud, the one who wants all the spotlight. The spotlight hog. I call them the spotlight hog, or I call them the main character. Somebody's got main character energy, Oh, I had a very good friend of mine who did this, and it was shocking because he was a great game master, but whenever he was a player, he expected to be the hub around what everyone else was doing. And it was very shocking and demoralizing for me. I was like, oh my God, what's going on with this guy? And ways to handle that guy is to just intentionally move the spotlight to other people. Be like, okay, cool. While you're doing that, let's see what Jordan is up to. Right?
Yeah, because you have the control to like move the scene. You can like let them do their thing and then cut back to them, cut back and forth. This sort of divides the party, but that kind of player often will do so anyway.
Another way is to reward the behavior that you really like. Like if he's cooperating with somebody, I say he, but if they are cooperating with someone, go, hey, yeah, you have more attention, more spotlight. Everyone's paying attention to you now. You can reward the behavior that you want to see at the table. You can do this by having NPCs be excited, be impressed, be inspired. And then there's the other one. I think this falls into what you were talking about with the power gamer, the rules lawyer. The rules lawyer who's always like, hey, that's not what the book says, or has built a character so strong that it's really difficult to challenge them, where you're not just absolutely destroying the rest of the table.
Yeah, they're making their system mastery everyone's problem.
Yeah. So the system mastery part, I like to turn that around and say, okay, I'll allow it, but you have to use your powers for everyone else at the table. You have to help everybody else be awesome. At least be available. Maybe they may not want you to rebuild their character, but be available if they do, right? But if they're a rules lawyer on top of that, if they're like, hey, that's not what this rule says, that's not what the book says, just make a ruling now and look it up later, or invite them to help. Say, cool, you know what? Why don't you write down how we should handle this in the future? It's okay to delegate, by the way. It is way okay to delegate. You don't want to get burned out. You can say, John, can you please run initiative for me? And you can ask Michael to keep notes. It's okay. You don't have to do it all by yourself. The third type of difficult player is the guy who breaks the mood, the table clown. This may be also the disengaged guy you're talking about.
Yeah, like that's another flavor. Like anything that like really takes everyone else out of what's happening, whether it's because they're just screwing around or they're just checked out.
Yeah, handling this is really case by case basis. I have altered this behavior through communication most often. Like, hey, please don't be so disruptive, right? In game, if you're at a convention or something and there's just not really outside the table time, you can occasionally have in-game consequences for being silly. It's fine to have the NPCs go, bro, what the fuck? It's fine. It's fine to have some disapproval amongst the non-player characters. Tell them the king gives them a side eye for that comment, that very inappropriate comment. And, they'll start to get the hints from time to time. And then the last one, I don't know if this is something you've ever run into, Vera. I call him the bossy character, the controlling character. It's the guy that wants to tell everybody else what to do. And for me, this was actually a husband and wife. And he was just constantly telling her, okay, do this, do that. Here's, roll this die, roll that die. And she never got a chance to make her own decisions at the table. It was really awkward.
I've often seen this like an evolution of spotlight hogging, where they like just want to be in control, so they want the attention, they want to like determine what's happening. But I see the delineation, because you do get people who are like they're quarterbacking, they're trying to plan things out that are more optimal for other players, and this could kind of take the wind out of someone's sails, because it makes people feel like they're doing something wrong which is not the way you want to feel during your adventure.
Yeah. Again, communication's big here. Like, take them aside and say, listen, you can't tell other players what to do. That's not what this game is about. It can get awkward. Like I said, this is a husband and wife team. So I was like, I'm going to have to talk to both of you for a second, please, if I may. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why safety tools exist. We talked about this in session 0. A lot of these difficult behaviors can be addressed sometimes with safety tools, but having those on hand can be useful. What are some ways you would handle these kinds of players, Vera?
Well, first off, you're right that it should be in one-on-one, right? Whatever you're going to tell somebody, it should probably be like out of session unless you need to like really put the kibosh on something. It's okay to like call things back to attention a little bit, like table control, like Ross was saying, if someone's like acting up a little bit, but you want to show respect for your players and ask for respect. I think that broad framework of wanting to level with people and be open and maybe a little bit manipulative with the respect stuff can be quite useful, because if they don't care about like how other people at the table feel and they make that obvious, maybe they aren't a good fit for the table. The bare minimum should be that one of your players is willing to talk this stuff out with you, right?
Mickey Stopwatch has a great comment. He says, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" is a very powerful spell. He's right. He's right. It's a 9th level spell by at least.
Power word discussion.
Right. And then comes the most difficult step, right? Which is when to disinvite someone.
Yeah, like it's going to be obvious sometimes that someone just should not be at the table. They're like way out of line. And this can happen in session. We're talking to like pulling people aside, not embarrassing them. There might be times where in the moment that person's done. And it is okay to end the game and disinvite them. And your players will respect this. There are certain things that are so out of line. This will rarely happen, but it could.
Hate speech, bigotry.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, we're done playing until this person leaves. And then you can maybe resume after they're gone. But like there's certain things you should just not tolerate, and you'll know. Otherwise, I would say that like there's a process of trying to level with somebody and ideally getting a better pattern of behavior out. But if you pull somebody aside and you say, look, this and this need to happen because it's respectful to their players, and this is a problem, and they're still doing it, and you pull them aside again, and it's the same thing. It's like, all right, so however many strikes you want to give them, as long as they keep doing this thing, it is going to worsen the quality of the game. And these are long-running activities, right? Like I've got some tables that have run for like 4 years, 5. There have been times when we've had to ask people to leave for various reasons. And there's a lot of reasons this can happen because they're just unable to be nice, because they're not invested in the game. They're like just hanging out on their phone. They won't like pipe up, like anything that distracts in this way. And that's always been the result of like a pattern of discussions where it's like, hey, this and this need to happen and nothing changes. And it's like, all right, so you're not invested in this, obviously, and maybe it'd be better if we parted, which is very awkward and very hard.
Yeah, I think my advice here would be to frame it as not a moral judgment, but just a mismatch of their expectations and yours. Usually, like, unless it's like the hate speech bigotry angle, in which you're like, just get the fuck out. But if it's seriously like, I like this person, they're not doing anything horrible, but they can't stay at this table, that's when you say, okay, listen, what you're looking for and what we're looking for are different things, and we need to do something about that, which means we are disinviting you from the table. Just be blunt. Sometimes I hate to say it, but rip the Band-Aid off and be blunt in that situation is probably the best way to go.
I'm terrible at that. I'm always like a shaking, like
I know it's hard. Like, I know we are, I think you and I are a lot alike because I'm inherently a non-confrontational person, but I've learned that you have to do it. You have to push through that anxiety because the game master, as we're talking about the dungeon mastering, you are kind of responsible for everyone having a good time. You are the trustee, the custodian, the gatekeeper. It's up to you to say, okay, I need to step in here, right? You can't rely on other people to do it for you. So that's, I know we're this is a lot. Like this is kind of like a therapy session as well as like early DMing stuff. But it's important, and I feel like that's why we need to bring it up.
Yeah, and you need to like talk to the group about it also, because you need to like break that news. Ideally, everyone's kind of on the same page. I was talking about like how it's important to not like ambush people at the table with like issues you might have with their the way they're engaging.
You were lost in the green void.
A different one than usual. It's important to not like ambush people at the table, but it can be useful to have like round table discussions if they're respectful and if everyone's down for it. But that should generally be the choice of the person who like is being an issue if they're comfortable with that, because it can be nice to try and find a path forward. Sometimes the person who's a problem player, you could really want at your table because you like them. But
or you're married to them.
Or you're married to them. And hopefully you like the person you're married to. That could hopefully those are a similar issue.
Yeah. I would like to tell a brief story about this, if I may.
Yes.
I have a very good friend of mine who has a lovely wife, and they game together or have gamed together in the past. And there's a story that both of them like to tell. So this is, to be clear, neither one of them are upset or angry about this. But he runs superhero campaigns, and he relies on a lot of tropes from comics and things of that nature. And his wife is aware of this. And there was a session where a kaiju was attacking the city coming out of the ocean, and the superheroes were all gathering together to battle the kaiju, which was a big deal. And, in his mind, he was building up this as a major event for the campaign. Well, his wife, again, who's savvy about comic book tropes, she says, clearly this is a distraction for the real crime. I go look for that. Yeah, to say that was disruptive is a understatement. It's clearly, like, I can clearly see how she arrived at that conclusion, but I can also clearly see the look of horror on his face as he's like, oh, Jesus, they really don't want this thing that I think is really big and important. They want to go do something else that this is a distraction for suddenly, and that's one of those moments where you may need to say no as a GM. But it can be difficult to address in the moment.
Yeah, because it's like, do you tell someone, I can promise you there's nothing else out there, go there? Like, that kind of, it affects the verisimilitude of the moment.
Title drop.
Yo!
Title drop.
To me, this brings up two kinds of issue that also can relate to problematic player styles. Those are metagaming and splitting the party.
Oh, the old chestnut. Never split the party.
Except sometimes split the party. Never always don't split the party.
That is difficult to parse. Could you please explain that?
Well, sometimes always you shouldn't definitely split the party except when you want to, but then you need to if you have to, so you shouldn't unless you must, but then you do when you will, right? And the party is split.
You're killing me. You're killing me right now. No.
Because of the way the spotlight works and because of the way that tabletop games run, it can be challenging to have multiple groups divided across the map for a few reasons. It doubles the amount of encounters and things that you have to go through. It makes it harder to keep track of what's going on. It makes it really hard to share the spotlight. You can quite naturally wind up in situations where one half of the group gets an hour at a time and the other half doesn't. You can avoid this by having everybody in the group together all the time, but sometimes that just doesn't make sense narratively. which is something you either have to get past by ignoring that and just having them band together everywhere and go everywhere as a big ball of dudes, or you can find ways to
big ball. Somebody clip that big ball of dudes. I love it.
That's the standard adventuring party, going shopping as a party of 6 people, shoulder to shoulder, going everywhere they want to go together in order, and skipping together, like, yay! Despite the fact each person wants one thing from one shop and they're all different places, but you sometimes just run it that way because you want the party to stick together.
I think the only way to do splitting the party well is to keep in mind that pacing idea and to just constantly, set yourself a time limit, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then go back to the other group. Make sure that you're not spending too much time, because if you spend, I want to say, I think probably 20 minutes is the cutoff, maybe, I don't know, somewhere around there, players will just pull out. They'll pull out their phone. Yeah. They'll be gone. You'll have lost them at a certain point. It depends on the group and the players, but rule of thumb for me is about 20 minutes.
Well, the most brutal version is what you're describing, where like the party split, like some people are just not at the story. And that is a good chance to say, hey, maybe you want to be at the story and not like investigating this non-crime.
Oh, well, I mean, that's another example, though, of that player you were talking about, the non-engaging player, which is the brooding loner. Oh, I don't. Oh, a lone wolf rides alone.
That's an entire archetype of problem where not only do they want to constantly split the party, this is like the rogue who goes ahead to pilfer the treasure in advance. This is the guy who wants to solo the dungeon, sneak through, scout everything, take all this stuff. This is the player who has their own idea about what they want to happen, and in character and out does not give a damn about what anyone else is interested in. They're going to do their thing because it's what their character would do. And
yeah, that's okay. That you just hit like my pet peeve. Do you not? This is advice for DMs, new, old, in between. I don't care. Saying it's what my character would do is not a good excuse to be an asshole. It's just their way of saying I'm being an asshole because I want to. Don't accept that. I never accept that. If someone says, well, it's what my character would do, I'm like, yeah, that's not good. It's still being a jerk. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's the kind of set thing that should only be said after like heroic sacrifice. Like, then it's fine.
Wesley. No. We need the Michael Scott meme right now.
Yes, as a rule of thumb, what your characters should do, what they would do, should align to the game they're playing in, because you've made them to be a character in this story. And ideally, what they would do is relevant to the story in some way. Crazy.
Yeah, every time someone says it's what my character would do, a cat girl dies. Just don't do it.
Think of the felonites, please.
Please think of the felonites. Thank you. Oh, Vera, you saw our Abhumans episode, did you?
I'm looking forward to that. Abhuman enjoyer here.
Oh, well, we've got a tier list and a full episode on it over at Lorebeards 40K. So
check out Lorebeards 40K for more on Space Cat Girls. Whoa.
Oh my God. So sorry. I know I dragged us off on a tangent. I apologize. Please speak about something you would like to speak about with new DMs.
Well, I'd like to bounce off of this discussion into a related problem, which is metagaming, because metagaming loves to pair with it's what my character would do, because somehow what their character would do is often a very meta idea. And they just know that there'd be something there, right? And it's what they would do because they're just that kind of person. They always check behind the waterfall. This is a problem with multiple flavors. People who've read the adventure in advance, people who are recognizing tropes and acting on them, people who act on information they've obtained from the GM. All sorts of stuff, and it's always a problem. Like, what are some examples of different kinds of metagaming and how to handle them? Perhaps you can start there. Like, what kinds there are.
Okay, I think one of the most egregious, and and sometimes unavoidable, which is weird. But one of the most egregious can be if the GM is using an adventure like a module, you've read it and you know it, or maybe you've game mastered it yourself, so you know it. Which this has happened to me. Metagaming in that context is using your personal knowledge of what is in the adventure to benefit yourself. You're like, I check, like specifically saying to the game master, I check for a hidden room on the south wall, because there's a hidden room on the south wall, right? That is metagaming, right? I mean, that's pretty. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's pretty meta. So the meta idea here is like it's like gaming based on your overarching knowledge. Like you've heard of the metaverse, whoa, which that's like the macro style, like top down view of what's happening in the game. And having read
Zuckerberg, you have to leave. We're not talking about that meta. Get out. Different metaverse.
Entirely different. So yeah, the number one thing to do if you've read the adventure is tell your GM, hey, just so you know, I have played Curse of Strahd before. I have played Kingmaker before. I have played Rough Nights and Hard Days. I know what's going to happen. And some adventures will have alternative paths and things intended for grognards and some people who have played it before. Otherwise, your GM can do development. They can work things out that are not just in the adventure to keep things fresh, right?
So here's fun history note here. Back in the day, there was the idea of shared experiences sometimes amongst players, where you get together and say, "Oh, have you played through Tomb of Horrors?" Well, I have. Don't jump into the demon's mouth. If anybody knows that reference, it's a very old 80s reference to instant death in the Tomb of Horrors if you jump in the demon's mouth. So yeah, it has been a thing for a long time where people will know certain things about certain very specific adventures. Curse of Strahd is one that's, I think, the more modern example where if you've played through Curse of Strahd, you have all the spoilers for that movie. All right, you already know what's going to happen in the broad strokes and in some individual moments. So that's. Yeah, I brought 50 gallons of holy water with me. Barovius is Hawk, yeah.
Because it's what my character would do. My character always wants to have 50 gallons of holy water.
I don't know if any of you guys are enjoyers of a webcomic called The Order of the Stick.
Wonderful, yeah.
The Order of the Stick is hilarious. And one of my favorite bits is the halfling, who is evil, describes his culture as it's very important for him to carry around a 1-inch thick sheet of lead because that stops detect alignment spells. But he does it because it's in his culture. It's just like when you become a man as a halfling, you carry around a 1-inch thick sheet of lead just in case, which is awesome metagaming and hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, so there's also metagaming that exists outside a specific adventure, right? Like if you know about macro concepts your character shouldn't. An example of this is kind of in Warhammer, and this is a hard one to navigate because your character shouldn't know how many corruption points they have. They might know something's wrong, but they don't know what their track is at, right? They don't know they're at like 2 points away from a mutation. They're not aware of this. People who want to, say, go on a pilgrimage to try and reduce corruption shouldn't be doing so because they want to reduce their corruption points. Their characters should be disquieted, unwell, and they should want to seek some kind of solace from that. This is the kind of thing that like plays into, again, campaign verisimilitude, which is like what motivates the actions of the characters should ideally be things like in the narrative, right?
Well, okay, I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit here. I see your point. I do see your point, and I do know groups who would love that approach. But I also know some players who they enjoy the game part of role-playing game. They like understanding how the system works. They like being able to interact with those rules, and they like being able to say, okay, I have X amount of corruption points. I know what that means. That is a certain style of fun. Now, I understand that may not be your particular approach, and that's fine. But I just want to say, I think it is okay for people to want to engage with the system a little bit more.
No, I think it's important to engage with the system, but I think that they have to find a narrative bridge for it.
Or it's metagaming. That's what I think you're saying, right?
Yes,
if there's no narrative bridge.
Yeah, like what's ideal is to find a way to connect that to some kind of in-character concept, because all of the mechanics, all of the game systems are meant to represent narrative elements and to connect them directly. So my strong preference is that kind of thing evolves via finding in-character motivations for these things, for connecting that to the narrative. Because metagaming, by its nature, ignores the narrative. It draws in exclusively system concerns, exclusively design concerns. And ideally, you're able to marry those with your character's motivations and so on. Like, if you're playing a character who is let's use Woofrup as an example, who has like 15 stacks of the dirty fighting talent because you want to mulch people. That character ideally should have some reason why they fight really hard and really mean and really nasty, like beating people up with their fists. It is abnormal, I would say, for them to just be really good at that because they know it's strong.
Well, one of my preferred ways to address this is to go back to that thing I said earlier about looking at the character sheet. And if I see they've invested really heavily in that particular thing, I could find a way to spotlight that. Hey, there's a bare knuckles fighting competition, right?
Yeah.
Or there's an old master who his hands were broken by his hands were irredeemably broken or unhealably broken by a organized crime group, but he still knows some tricks that he can teach you, right? There's ways to thread that, to pull that into the narrative, I guess is what I'm saying.
And it's great to you want your players to be in on that. Like, the ideal is for like the choices in their sheet to be motivated by things in their past. Like, I've seen what I'm talking about is like a school of character design where they pick things because they're objectively good on their sheet, but then don't connect that to the character.
Well, sometimes the system demands it. I will argue that if you're playing Palladium games, boxing is a requirement. You just have to take boxing. Why? You get an extra attack. Everybody takes boxing because they want the extra attack. Literally every character I've ever made for Palladium games has boxing because of that. And that's a fact of the system.
So there are cases where we can hand wave this, but that is metagaming, right? Like, everybody's a hobbyist boxer, or you just ignore it, whatever.
I mean, sometimes I try not to undercut you, and I apologize, but it was like, I know that. I know where that comes from,
No, but it's an important example because you want your character to be functional, right? I think the holistic ideal is when there's some reason for them to be that weird build, right? And sometimes maybe it just doesn't work because the system doesn't allow it to.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about individual systems on this show. I'm really excited to talk about some individual systems on this show.
Yes.
What are some other things you would say about? We haven't talked about table size yet in detail.
Yeah, we've talked about it in passing.
Mm-hmm.
So, table size refers to the number of players at a table,
mm-hmm.
which can range from solo games that you roll the dice, like tell the story yourself and write stuff down, all the way up to what's the largest table you've ever heard of, Ross?
I participated in a game with 20 players.
Oh my God.
Yeah, believe it or not, it was my introduction to Savage Worlds. And that's what sold me on Savage Worlds. I was like, damn, this system can actually handle this.
That's crazy. That's as many people as I had at LARPs that I did.
Ooh, well, LARPing is, we got to talk about LARPing sometime. Oh my God. It's going to be so much fun.
We should.
But please, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just the number of people at your table affects a couple of things very much, right? Number one, balance. Encounters are very different with 20 players. Oh my God, 20 players. Versus maybe one or two. To spotlight time. When you have two PCs in your group, about half of the session is going to focus on each of them. It's a lot of attention. It's a lot of room to investigate things. When you have 8 players, that is less the case. It becomes more about group dynamics and scenes that they're sharing because the spotlight is limited, right?
I think that every DM is going to find their magic number. Like I know what my magic number is. It's 5 players. Like that to me is perfect. That is exactly what I want. It gives me a good amount of different variety, and it gives me, I feel like I can give everybody in that group plenty of spotlight. So find your magic number.
Yeah, I think like most people get comfortable between 4 and 6, right? I've heard most commonly those.
Yeah.
I've heard some people enjoy running tables with like 8 people because they play sort of a looser style of like pub game where they're drinking stuff and rolling dice and they're messing around. It's a more hack and slash kind of crawl adventure, and that works fine. I have personally played in a 2-player game that is fantastic.
There is no one true way. Everybody's going to have like a different thing. Yeah, I've seen people do one-on-one games, and I've ran a few of those just sort of in between sessions. Like I need to do this thing, and I'm going to go. Okay, well, and believe it or not, both times it was my roommate, so a kind of privilege. Like, hey, you live here, I kind of have to. I feel like I really can't avoid this. I better just get it over with. So yeah, let's do that thing you need to do and spend a couple hours.
Which is I want to return to that idea in a second too, because that's an important thing.
A roommate privilege, or
more like solo sessions, but also that if you like
the in between gaming.
The real meta is being the GM's roommate.
or significant other, and that's honestly, that's for me is kind of a bit of a red flag. Like if I show up to a gaming, you guys may remember when we did the session 0 thing, and I talked about how I went to this guy's house and he flat out told me that it was all about his wife's character, and I was just like supporting her. It is a bit of a red flag if the game master is married to one of the players, because that instantly, for me, creates a little bit of a moment where I'm like, okay, I think we got a little privilege going on. But that having been said, I have run several games with my roommate as a player, and it's never been an issue. Partially because I always say the fact that he's my roommate is not going to, influence anything. It's just he's just here,
Yeah, and like sometimes it'll be fine if it's like part of a group that is solid and like there's an experienced GM. It'll often be okay, but in a new group, I would also treat it as a red flag. Like, okay, let's see how this develops.
Yeah. Oh, I've never had it happen to me, but I know there are groups where people will hit on other people using characters at the table.
I have a story.
Oh boy.
I had to leave a group I was in college.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. How did this play out?
I was a player in a 5e group, and it was cute. It was a neat little game, and I had been playing for a few sessions, and we went to some party where the host of the party, I was playing a Dragonborn bard, and this is the Dragonborn host of the party laid it on really thick. And it was like uncomfortable for me, and I was kind of demurring, like I was like kind of like trying to play it off, and clearly was like not having a great time with it. And then we kind of like navigated through it. I navigated in character. I was like being kind of standoffish and classy about it. After the session, I was like waiting around to sober up, and before long, I was the last one there.
Uh-oh.
And the DM started sidling up to me, and I proceeded to go sober up in my car after they like laid their head down in my lap without asking.
Oof.
So I was done. That was the end of that game for me.
Oof. Yeah, I am very sorry to hear that. Ugh.
That was probably my worst ever tabletop experience. Yeah, because I had told them afterward, like I wasn't like super into like that kind of like narrative beat. I was like, hey, I don't really dig being like hit on in character, etc. Like it made my impression was like the guy was like super sleazy, was like the character, but no, that was the yeah.
So yeah, this would probably be a good way to say, romance in the game is a topic that should probably be discussed in session 0, but I think the general rule of thumb is, maybe avoid it or be very open about like, hey, I would like to have some romance in this game, and is it okay if we explore, some flirting? and if the answer is no, just back off and be like, okay, cool, no big deal.
Yeah, like that's really a consent and safety thing. You need to be like comfortable with whoever you're like engaging in some kind of narrative romance with at the table. You want to prevent feelings from getting hurt. You want to prevent making people so uncomfortable they sit in their car for an hour in the dark to sober up before driving home. You want to avoid like
yikes.
You want to respect people's boundaries, right? Everyone should have fun, ideally, and it can make people uncomfortable really fast to like have someone coming onto them, even if it's in character.
Yeah, so watch out for that. and definitely, hopefully, as a game master, you're not the one doing it. Hopefully.
Yeah, like some games are a little bawdier in tone. I think it can be awesome to have a character whose like whole thing is they're like ridiculous Casanova figure, sure, but you want to like handle that in a way that's mature and that's fun for everybody.
For men of a certain age, like myself, that is the Pepe Le Pew problem.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. Oh boy. Anyway, let's talk about more fun things, I think.
Yeah.
What is another aspect of DM 101 that you would like to cover?
We've talked through communication, kinds of adventures, a little bit about preparation.
I've got one if you'd like.
Please go ahead.
Embrace chaos. Embrace chaos. Just embrace it. Player characters are we have a name for it at my table. We call it player bullshit. And it just, it references all the weird ass decisions. They might befriend your villain. They might discover, or they might believe that they've discovered something that's true about the world that isn't true. They might ignore your plot hooks. They might have wild plans that you don't anticipate. That's part of the fun, guys. It's fine. Embrace the chaos. Be like, okay, wow. And some game masters, like the really good ones I found, are the ones who will theatrically like throw away their notes or just be like, you know what, we're doing this now. because that does help build that trust. It helps you. We mentioned this in the session 0 episode, but role playing in general, in my opinion, it makes you vulnerable. And that's why trust is so important. And that's why consent is so important, because you're pretending to be wizards and elves in front of other people. That can be vulnerable, right? That can be soul bearing. So yeah, embrace the chaos and just be like, cool. All right, we're doing this now. I guess that's what's going to happen. But keep in mind that you do have the power to say no if it's out of control. Just don't flip out if it does get out of control. I guess what I'm saying. Help me rescue this metaphor.
You can lead a horse to water, but you shouldn't be upset if it tap dances.
There you go.
Is that a metaphor?
I mean, what is a metaphor? Well, it's for a lot of things.
A meta is for gaming.
Oh God, no. Zuckerberg, get out. I told you already. Get out.
This ties into this concept of player agency, right? Like whether with your actions you like really dramatically shift things, and yeah, sometimes they should. Like it really can build rapport to your characters, your players, to know that their choices and their interests have shaped what's happening in a dramatic way. Like this is also a meta sense type thing. Like they know that you're like doing things in the fly because you think it's cool. They'd be like, yeah, we're really in the groove now. You enter your flow state as a group, and it's awesome. That can happen.
Oh, I did have a thought about a quick problem player issue.
Yeah.
So I was playing a game where I was a wizard, D&D 5th edition, and I had I had the scholar background. I was from Candlekeep, which is a library,
Mhm.
And I was playing, the nebbish nerd wizard, which is one of my favorite tropes. I love being the nebbish nerd. And one of our other players just constantly was bagging on books and learning and studying, just constantly. And after a while, I had to turn to this person in character and say, "Did books kill your parents or something? Why are you why are you so down on this? This is like literally a core aspect of my character." That can be pretty demoralizing if someone finds if someone at the table is sort of being openly scornful about something you feel is important to your character. How would you address that?
Well, so I see that as an awesome opportunity because I'm an elf player, and everyone in Warhammer hates elves, and that's great because it sets you up for a really cool narrative where they learn uh, what reasons they have not to hate elves and how true all the reasons to hate elves are. And like there's this narrative that evolves from that, right? If there's some initial bias or conflict, but that has to be handled in a way that develops and is fun for everyone. Being constantly bagged on is not fun. What is interesting is having someone in the party have their views grow over time, the development that comes from that. So the way I would handle that as a GM is I would take some time to possibly sit down with one or both of them, depending, and be like, "Hey, how does this feel? What is the plan here? What is the motivation? Because you've got an opportunity here for some development to think maybe they're not so bad after all," which is like the classic elf dwarf. I could do that type beat.
It still only counts as one.
It's a chance for that, but you need to make sure there's not this like lingering hatred. Characters should be kind of mutable, much in the same way the campaign is. And we'll talk about this and like how to be a good player at some point, but it's important to allow enmity within the party if it exists, which is like kind of hard to do well in a fun way, to be a generative thing for the narrative, right? And you want to try and cultivate that as the GM. And if that can't be the case, you're like, hey, maybe knock it off a little bit.
Yeah, I think this kind of thing is an advanced technique. I would say if you're a new DM, I would say you want to be clear from the start. Everybody needs to be on the same page and everybody needs to be friends.
Yep, minimize inter-party conflict. Everybody should want to go on the adventure and they should all kind of get along. If you have like some ominous brooding character who is clearly like nasty and evil, you better be sure that the party is cool with it and the player can handle it, because that can work really well if done in a clever and mature way.
Old man note here. Back in the day, this used to be the drow player who wants to be like Drizzt Do'Urden.
Drizzt, yes.
This is like 30 years ago. Okay, to be clear, but back then there was a lot of people who would show up and you'd have to say, well, those people like culturally kind of don't like drow. So how do we deal with that?
Clearly, the solution is to have a party of 5 dual-wielding drow rangers.
I have always wanted to do the all X party, and we did do an all dwarf party in Ravenloft very briefly, but it fell apart. I want to get back to that. I would love to do like an all bard party. That would be amazing to me.
Oh yeah.
Or an all elf party would be pretty rad. Oops, all bards, says Hawk. Yeah. Exactly. Funny note, in Warhammer, you can play an elf and be hated by even other elves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My elf is.
Like dark elves hate high elves, there you go.
Yep.
All bards, full boy band, says Wesleus. Yeah, very funny. I like that one.
Excellent. Something I wanted to talk about is solo sessions.
Let's hear it. Solo session. I am not familiar. So what is it?
You've run them.
Session. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Now I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a solo session, for context, is a one-on-one game. It's a session of the game that takes place where one party member has the spotlight the whole time. And that is the thing. They run through some arc, some important thing that they need to spotlight the whole freaking time for, and it is done in a separate session because they're the star of it and they need it for context. And there's a few ways to use this. Didn't Lawhammer do this at the start of the campaign?
I'm honestly, I don't know.
I think it was a prelude to the main campaign, was a solo session with each character. And like, that's one way of doing things, is to use it as an introduction to the system, to the game, etc.
Oh, can I say something? I think
Go ahead.
I think preludes are awesome, and
Yeah.
that's like my favorite way to do a one-on-one, is to do it as a prelude to joining the game. Love it.
Yeah, like, it's a fantastic tool for a lot of things. Yeah, lots of solo sessions. Yes, you have the point X's. It's a useful way to really dive into something, whether it's a flashback or it's a prelude, as Ross is saying, to the main game, or like to set up the adventure. It's a super flexible tool that requires you as the GM to do extra scheduling and lots of extra work. So I would not do these all the time, but super powerful, because you want to make someone know that they're heard, that they're seen. Sit them down for 2 hours and run a game just for them. I would argue that in the amazing world of like digital things, it might be nice, like, let some players sit in on this if they're curious, they want to hang out and so on. But there's a power to the privacy also. It depends on like what's happening, but it can be useful.
That is, it's true. I did use them often as an in between session thing, where a guy's like, hey, I want to upgrade my mecha suit between this session and next session. I'd be like, okay, cool. And I could just say, well, you do it, but I had a really cool idea for how it could be impactful to his story, and I was like, well, let's give it out a little bit, and we did, and it was really, really fun, and we had a great time. Unfortunately, the player never brought it up during the rest of the campaign, but I at least felt like I did something, because enhanced his experience with it. And one of the best ways to know what to do with a one-on-one is to take notes as a game master. Yeah, I don't mean to be obsessive. Like, you don't need to be like the guy from Seven, all right? But take some notes. If there's a plot hook or a name that you think is really cool, write it down, because calling back to that stuff, it makes the world feel cohesive and responsive to what the players just decide to do. And you can use that best during a solo session. Vera, talk about it.
Absolutely. A solo session is a chance to bring up things that mattered specifically to an individual player. It is a chance for them to do something that is important to them and only them. And ideally, you can thread in things that they've alluded to being interested in the past. Like, this is where note-taking is awesome, because you can literally go through from months back and see things they were intrigued by or wanted to do and thread those together. Things that might not land for the whole party, but affirmatively do for an individual person. And again, this depends on the kind of thing you're trying to accomplish, but it's a great chance for like your rogue to get a message from the Thieves Guild and have a high stakes meeting of some kind. It's a great chance for your mage to go on an astral journey to encounter some kind of a dreamed vision of what might be relating to some goal they have. It's a great chance for your cultivator to go through a tribulation and develop their internal key, things that they're intrigued by and care about and might serve even as a reward, but that require a lot of attention and do not mingle with the spotlight sharing element of the game.
Rothian Fairmoon has an interesting point here. He says, one thing my group did, which I consider a big no, is they made one of the players the captain of our naval campaign. Don't let a player be captain unless everyone can play well with that, he says.
Yeah. So this returns to what you mentioned, like the leader kind of bossy problem player, which is a kind of person who will naturally gravitate as if by magic to a position of in-character authority. That's definitely a group vibe kind of thing. Ideally, someone who plays a leader is a good leader, and also everyone in the party is down to have someone who is a leader, and you kind of need both.
Sometimes this can be conceptual. If you're playing a superhero campaign, for example, which I have done quite a bit, It is a common trope in superhero fiction that there is a team leader, who will say Avengers Assemble, or, whatever the battle cry happens to be. And it can be a lot of fun to like want to play that guy. But you're right. If you have a defined role, like captain of a naval fleet or team leader or something along those lines, it's crucial. This is where buy-in becomes super important. Everyone has to be on board with that from the start. Otherwise, the loudest voice in the room can become, for better or worse, that person, that role.
This is bad for the vibe. No one wants to go and hang out for 4 hours to be told what to do by someone they don't really see as a leader, and like it creates tension in all sorts of ways. As the GM, you should definitely facilitate conversation about this if anything even similar is happening. In games like Woofrip, you might have a character who's nobility, for example, and in character might feel entitled to being in charge of stuff. In one group, that might go over quite well. You might have some townsmen and maybe some knights and so on, members of the soldiery, who do see them as an authority figure. In another group, you might have some Azrai wanderer and a roguish type, a worshiper of Renal, the thief god, and you might have them completely ignore this supposed authority and just let them bluster as they will and be useful where they might. Both styles are okay, but you want to not force people into positions they don't want to be in, because their heroic fantasy might not involve taking orders from damn well anybody. So it's about meeting needs, communication, and so on.
Wes Luz has a great point here. He says, I've had the reverse, where I desperately did not want to lead, but when I showed up, nobody spoke up or did anything or decided anything, and that got boring after 20 minutes. Yeah, I can see that.
I have had this experience also, and it was a group issue. It was a problem where there were very few players in the party who wanted to take an active role. And we'll talk about this like during player 101, like player styles and so on, but you can have group dynamics where there's basically nobody who wants to call the shots and speak up, and as a result, kind of nothing happens. And people are kind of led by the nose, very slowly, grazing on narrative beats. And as a GM, you can run this pretty effectively by just presenting them with things and like keeping them very tightly on rails. But I think this is not my favorite style of group, because I also want stuff to like happen for things to be a little more vigorous, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, if that's an interesting problem to have, is a group where nobody wants to be decisive. I think that might be a good time to have the mascot once again restate the stakes. If you guys don't do this, the bad guy wins, or whatever happens.
And a group like that needs a mascot. They need somebody to like usher them along. They need some kind of lead to get where they're going, because they'll otherwise sort of not do much.
The mascot in this case is the guy poking the thing with the stick. Come on, do the thing.
Come on, adventure.
But that is also a good time to steal something and run away.
Yeah.
Because even an indecisive group, I would strongly suspect, I would be willing to bet real money that even in an indecisive group would be outraged at having something stolen.
Yeah, and like this is sort of a stylistic thing, because there are cases where people are so passive it can clash with your vision for the game, and that's partly a group formation thing, right? You want to put together a group that has a play style that aligns with what you're trying to do, and you also want to make the play style of the game, the tone of the game, align with what they want, and it's important to have alignment there.
Here's an interesting quote. Lord of the Solar City says, you guys talking earlier about disengaged players really opened my eyes to the main issue of my current group.
I love your avatar. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah, it's a slan. I love it too. But he's saying when they're invested, things are so fun. But when they're not, it can be tough. It's usually two of my players that are the the issue?
Yeah, Ross has talked about some awesome ways to get people to buy in and engage, and all of those tools in your kit are going to be effective for trying to pull people in. You could talk about it out of character, possibly, if it feels like it's a recurring issue, but affirmatively for me, it's the same thing. When everyone's invested, the game feels great. When people aren't, it's not. I had a few games where I was the only one really passionately engaged with the story, and as a result, I felt like I always had the spotlight, and it was frustrating because other characters would get prompted and called on and kind of demur and not like engage. And I wound up leaving that group after the end of an arc because it was like not the thing. The GM and I wound up doing other stuff later. But
I have a story about that too. I want to bring that around. I just saw this comment from Soul Dater, I think is how you pronounce that. He says, I just wouldn't play with too many passive players. There's a lesson that took a long time to get into the role-playing game community, because we were, again, old man talking here. In the early days, it was difficult to find players, and then it became socially unacceptable for a long time. So you kind of got this attitude of like, we'll take anybody just as long as we can play, right? It was a cultural thing. But at least as early as I would say early 2000s, the idea kind of came back around, and the idea now, which I believe is actually more accurate, is that no gaming is actually better than bad gaming. Don't settle for bad gaming.
Yep. Bad game, not better than no game.
Yeah. That's Wesley has it here. He says, "Oh yes, bad D&D or tabletop RPG is not better than no game." So, yeah, when Soul Dater says he would just rather not play with a group like that, that is a perfectly valid response. There is no requirement to game with people that make your life difficult.
Yeah, like if you're GMing a group and it is just not working out for you, it's just not the vibe, it is okay to wrap things up after an arc and say, all right, I'm not feeling this. You have that option. You better be sure about it. But there can be situations where the party just is not what you had envisioned, and it's like you're not having fun, and you should have fun. You deserve to have fun. GMing should be a thing that is fun for you as well as the players. It is not a burden you have to bear. It is ideally a source of joy.
Ricky Chapman, once again, thank you, sir. Oh my gosh. For people who don't know, super chats are the way to make sure we keep doing our show. It is the best way to support us as creators. If you want to see more Lorebeards Roleplay, the super chats are the way to go. So we deeply appreciate all you guys' support. Ricky Chapman is one of our superstars. We see him a lot, and he's got a really cool tabletop game that I would like to know more about, honestly. So he says here, we had a solo session where we had to get presents for another player character's wedding. Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. We were playing D&D 5th edition. It went nuts when we went for a nice magic trident and ended up leading a fish slave revolt in the plane of water. Wow, I really want to play that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, part of the joy of a solo session, you get to go on a real adventure there.
That sounds really, really cool. Holy shit. I mean, that doesn't necessarily need to be just a solo session, but that's a hell of a one, I gotta admit.
Well, it's so cute too, because like it's preparation for a session. It's gonna be like a big event between other characters. So maybe that lets one of the guest characters in on the fun of it, because there's gonna be a lot of spotlight during the wedding, and they go this awesome adventure, leading an entire revolution.
You want a fun fact, Vera?
I love fun facts.
When I first started playing D&D back in '83, I was a metagamer, and I got shocked out of it in my very first session of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, typical, you go to a tavern and there's a guy with a quest moment, right? It was just me and my friend and the DM. So 3 people. And I turned to my friend and I was saying out of character, I was like, I don't know if we could trust this guy. And the game master is like, he knew what to do. He was like, are you saying that in character? Because he's sitting right there. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, consequences. Like, oh yeah, we can't, because that's metagaming. Like that, I managed to grasp the concepts of metagaming in just that little brief interaction and how that pulls you out of the narrative. Whereas if the things you say are in character, are treated in character, that makes the immersion stronger. It makes the consequences more impactful. And it taught me to be more immersive in my game mastering, to try and make everything feel like they're there, because then they feel more connected to what's going on and what their choices mean.
Verisimilitude. Whoa. Yeah, like it is powerful also just to say, I'm not sure we can trust this guy in their face. That is an option.
Right. I mean, and but that's not what I intended to do. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some discussion about this issue of like passivity in the group, and I want to note that we talked about this a little bit in session 0, but people have all sorts of visions about what might happen at a role-playing table, what they want to accomplish there. And there are people who want to feel like they have a front row seat to an awesome adventure where they get to sometimes have a little bit of influence on it. And they're fun. They want to like hang out with their friends and be included, and they want to see cool stuff happen and put their finger on the scale sometimes. The problem is when you have too many people with that play style. There is no one driving the cart. So I would say a group cannot be half or more players kind of like that, because if it's in practice someone who doesn't really want the spotlight, that can make things flow pretty okay. It is not an issue. They should have the opportunity to do stuff and be like brought in where possible, but it allows for you to really focus in on people who are more driven by like character narratives, character arcs, and they'll be fine with it. They'll enjoy that. That's what they wanted in the game. Knowing that as the GM matters, knowing what people are hoping to get out of it. If someone is quiet because they're quiet and they just want to hang out, that is a different issue than they're quiet because they feel like they have no agency.
100%. I know I have met players who are like, I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be included. I don't need to take big actions or have big moments. I just want to be here to support and be part of this group. There's some people that is entirely fulfilling, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and they might find their footing. They might gain some confidence, get a little ambitious as time goes on, and great, allow that, encourage that, make them feel like they have that option at all times, or they might not. They might not. That's okay too.
But you're right. If over half the party is that's a problem.
Yeah, if it's affecting your fun, if it's affecting the vibe at the table, it can be very low energy, which is potentially an obstacle.
Yeah, well, energy. I mean, we talked a lot about energy, but yeah, energy is something you need to be aware of as a game master. Keep an eye out for it. Player energy, the group energy. There's times where it's important to ramp things up. Convention games are a good example of this, because you usually, or at least the games that I have been in and the games that I have run at conventions, usually you want that last hour of the session to be a big, cool moment, whether it's a giant fight against the villain, which it typically is, or sometimes it's like you get to make the Captain Kirk speech in front of the computer that all the tribals are worshiping, whatever. It can be lots of different things, but the point is usually that big moment is at the end. And if there's not enough energy at the table to support that, you sometimes have to generate it as a game master. So how do you generate energy as a game master, Vera?
There's a handful of ways. Setting the mood can be good. Musical playlists, a sudden change in background music can signal quite strongly that there is a tonal shift taking place in the narrative. Things are pacing up. It can be useful to have effective character voices, perhaps. So then you don't have to do this, but you can. It can keep things feeling a little more immediate. Having good descriptive tools for scene setting and so on can be quite useful. If in doubt, you can practice Reiki circulation and activate the meridians of one of your players, like kind of get them a little pepped up. Caffeine is good for this also. Serve like some kind of highly caffeinated snacks, perhaps. Slip no-dos into the dumplings. Wow.
Now I want to know more about the no-dos slipped into the dumplings. Wow.
Good for those long all-nighter sessions, right?
I was thinking something as simple as standing up.
Yeah.
Honestly, you'd be shocked at how effective a tool it can be to just simply stand up to signal something big is happening. Also, I like to talk with my hands when I'm trying to raise the energy. And you can do this by just making big sweeping gestures. And then the Dark Lord enters the room. And I've changed my voice. I've done a gesture and the energy changes.
You need to be excited for your game.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why I've been so friggin' serious about like you have to make sure you're having fun as the GM is because if you're not having fun, if you're not stoked to be there, no one in the party can exceed your threshold of excitement, right? It is hard to get people more excited to be there than you are. So you got to make sure what you're doing, you're passionate about, you feel good about, and that you can bring that energy forward because people will respond to it. People will mirror your energy. If they like you and they trust you, they will bounce off the vibes you are putting out. It's the halo effect, right? It makes the whole game feel better and seem better if they like you more.
Yeah, I there's a lot to be talking. We could do probably a whole episode on energy and maintaining energy and building energy. One of those things we talked about earlier with combat, like changing the terrain or having reinforcements show up. That's another good opportunity to get really, really excited because it's a, you know, it's the God, there's a video game term for this. I forget what it is. Anyway, it happens a lot in Dark Souls when you're like, it's the second stage. There it is, the second stage. That's
yeah.
Second stage moment. When the thing you're fighting suddenly changes up how it's acting and how you have to react to it. So
yeah, like in some ways, this is the art of the reveal, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because the reveal, the surprise, the change is a chance for a shift in the mood, a shift in the energy. Whether that's dropping a big-ass miniature on the table, or that's standing up and speaking in a booming voice, whether it's the playlist cutting off into creepy ambiance, whatever it is similar in principle to the second stage boss, to the page turn into the full spread in comics, to the sudden shift of scene in a film. It is what makes people snap back to the surreality you are putting forward.
Got a couple of super chats to read, so I would like to bring those up. Biofoot 7874, thumbnail is great. Like you're questioning Andy.
Well, thank you so kindly.
I mean, I guess. Biofoot, we appreciate your support, buddy. It's always fun to see your comments.
He's got a lot to answer for. We have used as an example today too.
That's true. And
anyway, good GM.
Brock 6000, thank you for your support, Brock 6000. Do appreciate you. I played in a long-running game, which I have fond memories of, but I could not tell you who the main villain was or what we were trying to do or prevent. Advice for having memorable or invested arcs. Ooh.
So I'm going to be kind of controversial here, and I'm going to say that the most important thing isn't whether you remember what was said or what happened, but that you remember how something made you feel.
Agreed.
I think that the most important thing is that you have those fond memories, and it was a wonderful time. I will say that the most memorable moments are things that are particularly unusual. Something that is unexpected is more likely to encode in memory. Furthermore, something that is brought up multiple times is likely to encode in memory. The more something is a surprise and an amazement, and the more it's reviewed and brought through, the more it'll carry and stick. But I wouldn't worry too much over trying to deliberately construct things that are memorable, because in a good game, the game itself will be memorable. There will be cool things that happen, stand out. So it happens naturally.
There are some tools you can use to be a little bit more memorable. The right word choices, just having a thesaurus for one reason, can be super helpful. Honestly, you can gain a lot of mileage out of pre-writing down some scenes and some dialogue that you want to use, and finding more impactful words for it. But here's something I do a lot is try to excite the senses. Talk about more than what you just see. How does it How does it taste? How does it sound? How does it feel? And B, try to relate as much as you can to the world around you and the world around the players. Like if you can say, okay, you remember how far it is across from my apartment across the parking lot. That's about how far away you are from the bad guy, and that suddenly gives them an idea better than you saying, well, he's about 300 feet away, right? You can use measurements of things around you, or hey, do you remember that big blizzard we had last year? Well, this is like that, only worse. Relate it to things that are part of their lives, and you will find it sticks a little bit more when you're describing it. And don't be afraid to get a little silly. I guess what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Be confident. You know, it's okay if you have you're like, I don't know if I can do voices. Just try it out, man. Most people are going to be like, they're going to appreciate the effort, even if you're not Kermit the Frog, right? Which, by the way, I sound a lot like Kermit the Frog when I get excited. But you can just having the confidence to try and do that silly voice is a big thing, and it can create some very memorable moments.
People will remember Kermit the Sith Lord. In terms of invested arcs, I think anything the players feel they have agency over is something they're likely to invest in, and that'll stick in their mind for that reason. When they're shaping what journey they're going on, as well as trying to overcome obstacles, that will help encode stuff. When they're sort of feel like they're in the driver's seat, not to say they're sandboxing and like navigating that way, but they're pursuing a line that they've devised, like allowing them to really feel that agency. The more they're considering their options and planning out the possibilities they have, the more that'll stick in mind, I think.
Aaron Alston has some really great advice for this. Investment over a long-term campaign, I think, is what you're talking about, because you mentioned it was a long running game. Mm-hmm. So Aaron, what he would do is he would have a little form he would give out every few months. I think every 4 months or every 6 months. And it was kind of like a wish list. The players would say, you know, here's something I'd like to have happen to my character. Here's something I'd really like to do with my character. And he even included like a little chart of how much torment they wanted to go through. Cause he was more than happy to, like, you know, have your old girlfriend hook up with the villain, or have, you know, if you wanted to feel that angst, he was willing to give it to you. Aaron's games were intentionally built on a framework that was similar to like a soap opera, where there was a lot of emotional highs and emotional lows. And the questionnaire was helpful because it gave him an idea of what that player really, really wanted to see, really wanted to experience. And I feel like that is investing. I feel like that's memorable. If you get to do the thing you've always wanted to do.
Yeah, dealing your players in, letting them have that agency to shape what's happening in the game, even in a macro meta sense. For sure, communicate, understand, care.
Yeah, Brock 6000. I love surveys. LOL.
I also, this is my pleasure. A good survey pleases me immensely. You make them fun too. Like, there's ways to spice them up and make them cute. So. I think that just pouring yourself in will lead to memorable moments like that, like giving them chances to pour themselves in as well. Like when it's a big collaborative effort, it leads to enduring good vibes, I found.
Wes Luce is pointing out it's usually the one thing that no one should have succeeded but did, or why the frack that one thing did not work and made everyone go to hell in a handbasket. And I think he further points out, he says, I just go. This is my character's goal. I don't know if I succeed, and I want the option to fail and see what happens then. Right. No one's saying, I don't think we're saying that you should never fail. But that failure should be interesting.
Yeah.
I think. Can I give an example?
Please.
Oh my God. Okay. I love telling this story because it makes me look like an idiot for not having a plan ahead of time. So there was a moment in my Shadows Angeles campaign, which is where the player characters are all superpowered cops fighting demons in a cyberpunk city. Mm-hmm. Okay. At one point in that campaign, a terrorist group was trying to set off a nuclear device at the heart of the city. And two of the player characters were the only ones who were able to get to the device in time to disarm it. And I said, okay, roll this to see if you succeed. And they failed. And I was just like, oh shit, I did not plan for this. Oh God. Oh crap, what do I do now? Right. And I'm like, and fortunately, my improv training kicked in to salvage this terrible lack of foresight. And I was able to say, okay, you do something that indicates that the bomb should go off, but the numbers stop at 0 and the device does not detonate. And you feel like something profound has changed in the fabric of reality. Now what do you do?
Ooh.
So I said, like, a wizard, a god or a wizard or something stepped in to stop that. And now you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that instead of, you know, the sledgehammer ending for men of a certain age, where a nuclear device like destroys the entire TV show at the end of the season. So that's an idea. That's one example of that.
Yeah, and that's strong because it preserves tension. It lets them fall forward. Being next to a bomb that should have exploded but didn't is also scary because they have to handle this thing now, and that's unsettling.
So that's one of those cases where, yeah, I was like, oh shit, they failed. I gave them the option to fail and they failed. Now what?
Yeah, which is maybe a lesson. Like, hey, it's good to consider alternative options if things don't go to plan, because usually you don't want to just TPK people like out of nowhere based on one test.
By the way, that campaign ended fine. Everybody had a great time. So
yeah,
that's all that matters.
That is all that matters. That is, in fact, that we established as rule 0. Yeah, having fun. Important.
So we got 10 minutes left, Vera. What would you like to finish with?
Oh boy. I feel like drawing it back to rule 0 there is kind of appropriate somehow. Let me think this through. I think we've covered a lot of possible scenarios. I think we've covered a lot of broad spectrum things. We've gotten into a little bit of 201 in some cases. Hinted at some things players could do. One element I would consider is like balance. In terms of like work-life balance, how much you want to pour in, because it, again, shouldn't feel like a job. It's important to do a good job. Everyone relies on that, but you want to preserve your own fun no matter what.
There are some great resources for prepping that don't, I forget the name of it, but there was actually a book that came out a while back that was really good about teaching you how to prep without a lot of work. I'll have to look it up and find the name of it later, or maybe somebody in chat knows the name of it, but there was a really good, there's some great resources out there to help you reduce your prep.
Yeah, finding like expedient and efficient ways to do that kind of stuff will do you really well, and don't worry too much. Like, if you're a new GM, you'll get into the swing of things. It's a lot of fun. I think everyone I know that's tried it has gotten more comfortable even in their first session they've run, and it's a good experience.
Cabo, you saved me. Thank you, sir. Cabo says it's Sly Flourish's Lazy DM Guide. Yes, that is the one. That is exactly the one I was thinking of.
Biofoot says, talk about the fishmen. They can't stop us now. Fishmen mentioned.
I knew it. Biofoot, he is the biggest Fishman fan in the world. You know what? Here's the thing. I've always wanted to do like a pirate adventure, like sailing on the seas and just just visiting different islands. And the Sahuagin from D&D, which are the fishmen that live under the sea, they're technically sharkmen, but those guys are rad and they hardly ever get screen time. It would be really cool to do a whole campaign where the Sahuagin are the main enemy and the final battle is us going underwater to one of their undercities to deal with them and their vile priests. That would just be amazing. Cool. I am 100% on that one.
The fishmen show up all over. Look at that.
Sahuagin. Oh, by the way, you actually do some of this in Baldur's Gate 2. You go to the Sahuagin city and you deal with the prince there and the priestesses. It's pretty rad.
Oh, yeah.
I'd forgotten about that until I just remembered.
I guess speaking of Baldur's Gate and like preparation and things, one form of preparation, you got to be careful about this, but you can borrow stuff. You can pull from like media you think is clever. The less likely your players are to get the joke, sort of to understand what you're pulling from, the better. But you can come up with some really clever stuff by pulling plot twists, by pulling mysteries and so on from other media. Like, this is allowed.
We live in the golden age of television. There is, in fact, so many great shows, it's impossible to watch them all. So if you have a show that you like a lot and you feel like, hey, I can grab this episode from season 1 and use that as my plot, do it. The odds are, especially now and into the future, odds are high that they will not have seen it or even remember it.
Yeah, like if you get diverse enough with what you pull from, you can do all sorts of stuff. You want to run a closed door mystery, but you are not a Arthur Conan Doyle, find one. Do that.
There's so many versions of Sherlock Holmes. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah, like drawing inspiration is great. Great way to set the tone as well. Preserving that tone is important. Having fun is important.
That's memorable NPCs can also be pulled from TV shows or movies. I used to pull almost all of my NPCs from old episodes of Star Trek, but I mean, you can do whatever you want. So find some show that's got some great characters and just bring them out.
Yeah, and a great resource, a fantastic resource, I am sure we're going to talk about again, and we have talked about before, is TV tropes.
Damn it, Jim, I'm a cleric, not a barbarian.
You can pull all sorts of stuff there. Like, I would recommend anybody who's interested in GMing or playing or writing in general, just mess around on TV tropes and explore. Put in a word you like and go adventuring, discover stuff, find ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. TV tropes is a great resource. I'd forgotten about that one. Honestly, yeah, there's actually a lot of great places with a lot of good advice. If you just need names or you need adventure hooks, Reddit is one of my first stops if I want to find some good adventure hooks. RPG Net is also, well, I mean, it's kind of older, again, old man, but that's another good place to look for some things like 101 great places to have a sword fight. You can find that on the internet. That's awesome.
That's super cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there. Don't be afraid to use them.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to have stuff ready. Like, have a list of names appropriate for the setting in your screen, perhaps. Just have stuff on hand you can pull from. Whenever you're able to make running the game look easier than it is, it'll help things flow nice. People will be really impressed. It seem really cool.
Something I've been using lately in my Star Wars campaign is I found a soundboard, which is just Star Wars sounds, like blasters and blast doors and ships taking off and going into hyperspace. And you would be surprised how just having the right sound at the right time can add to that immersion. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of out there, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different tools, including soundboards, including music, like Vera was talking about earlier, having a playlist. Portable speakers are very easy to do these days. What are some other tools that you would recommend?
Ooh, other tools? Props can be great if you have like coins to show people, artifacts. Writing letters on handouts and aging them a little can be amazing. Burning stuff can be great.
Well, just don't set fire to the house or anything. But
we do. Only a little though.
No, yeah,
that's memorable.
Coins are very easy to find. You can, and cheap. Like if you want like fantasy coins, you can find those very cheaply these days. There's going to gaming conventions, honestly, going to the dealer's room, you will see a whole bunch of really cool stuff that you can add to your table. I found like a little map case that's like a little leather map case. And never discount the value of just printing out. I mean, even just on a color printer, printing out the faces of your NPCs and putting them on the table. And then you can just either hold them up whenever they're talking to that guy or point to it to add to that immersion. Because, you know, I don't look like Lando Calrissian, but if I need to speak as Lando Calrissian, I can pick up Billy D. Williams' picture and say, there's this guy, and he says the following words, you know.
Yeah, it seems about right. Just coming in with stuff. Anything you can show the players, anything they can hold, all of that's great. All of that's great.
Handouts are great. People love handouts. One thing I like to do is in a long campaign, I like to do a dramatis personae, just a list of people you've met, so it's easier for them to remember the important people.
Oh yeah, I see.
So I will hand out a list and say, here's the folks you've talked to. Because because I love it when they go back to one of my NPCs and they're like, oh yeah, it's this lady who was the fishmonger, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and making handouts like rule things people are going to want to check over again is great, especially in a digital tabletop. You can just like make a whole list of every rule in the game and just let people quick reference them. So
every rule, that's not exactly a quick, that's not exactly a quick reference card,
you can
but
make them collapsible. Like, it just, in case something needs to be looked up, it's better than like flipping through the book sometimes because you can pull it up at the table. It can be useful. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah, it's putting tabs in your rule book to combat and spells.
Yes.
You're going to reference a lot. Those are good ideas. Yes, Wesley's, he says, whatever you do, don't set fire to your house.
Okay, maybe don't do that.
But when she's talking about burning stuff, why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I've heard of boss character sheets being burned as they're defeated. The whole thing goes up. Like the sheet for this like evil dragon, as it falls into the abyss and it oozes into mist, you ignite the thing, tear it in half, do something physical.
That I've never had that happen, but now that sounds awesome. I kind of like that idea. It's a dramatic, a dramatic end. He's like, oh, this character's gone, and you rip it in half or burn it.
It hits hard. They're so done that their like physical presence in the meta space is eradicated. It's awesome.
Love it. He is cast into the abyss. Well, this is about all the time we have for today's show.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun though. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I think we've covered a lot of cool GMing things. I hope you guys do go in GM. Maybe you have fun with it too.
That's right. If you want to know more about Lorebeards, we have a Discord, which I think Hawk can put a link to up in the chat. The Discord is very useful if you haven't joined it. We have a lot of great conversations there. It's very active. Hey, it's a great place to find players, maybe potentially for an online game.
That's true. There is a role-playing channel in the Discord. If you want to try GMing, I bet you can find some folks there. So
that's about all I have to say on the subject.
Yeah, that's GMing 101. Stay tuned for 201 at some point, perhaps. But I think we're going to be covering being a good player in the nearish future. A lot of cool stuff about specific games. Do some interviews. We got a really cool schedule coming up. So
awesome. Yeah, we do have we have some really fun stuff, and we're going to have some more community polls, I think, as well. So
yes. Very likely. At least once a month or so.
Keep an eye out for it. But until then.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.